Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the XboxEra Podcast. I'm joined by Shpeshal Ed, Kaironaut, and we have a special guest, Adam Isgreen from Microsoft Creative Director. How you doing, guys? Everyone wave.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us, Adam.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's good for you to be here. It's not bad, 5 podcasts in, and you know, we've got a Microsoft Creative Director joining the crew and chatting about games and stuff, so it's a good thing for you to join in. So we're very pleased to have you.
Thanks
heaps. So on that front, before we get into the normal podcast norms, obviously we've got stuff we want to know, like loads and loads of questions, and we've written them all down on a list. I actually almost set up a prop for this, where I had like a big sheet of parchment, and I was going to like Monty Python style unroll it, and it would roll off into the distance. But I thought that would be somewhat lame.
I'm a fan of Python, so that's totally fine.
It's so nice to hear that other people like Monty Python still. Honestly, I tried to show my wife some of this, and I think it missed her from about 5 years, and she just kind of looked across at me. I think it was something like Attack of the Killer Blancmange sketch or something like that, and she's just looking at me like, is this supposed to be funny?
Is this funny?
Honestly, love, yes, it is.
have you not shown her Life of Brian or
I've tried.
Holy Grail?
Holy Grail. I mean, like, you can't go wrong with Holy Grail, right?
They're all classics. They are all absolutely.
It's an acquired taste.
I think they were the seminal sketch show, like, you know, before you had things like Fast Show and other things. I mean, I'm talking from a British perspective, but it's a dying art nowadays, and I just miss seeing them on TV. But every now and then you'll catch a rerun, and it'll be some absolutely ridiculous sketch like Bicycle Repairman. Always cracks me up.
My favorite is the mafia muscling in on the military. How many planes you got, Gov? Be a shame if someone was to set them on fire. You know, like that whole mafia muscling the military is just so great to me. Like,
they have got some.
There's so many good sketches though.
Yeah, I mean the classics like the Dead Parrot sketch,
Cheese Shop, Dead Parrot. Yeah.
It's just John Cleese's. Have you seen? I think it's arguably it's like kind of their worst film, but it's also got the best musical intro. Meaning of Life.
Oh yeah, of course.
The whole every sperm.
Every sperm is sacred. No, the corporate raiders thing in the beginning is brilliant. That thing that Terry Gilliam does.
Yeah, the whole sailing through the seas of the financial.
Yeah, the buildings actually being like ships, like corporate raiding, like literally corporate raiding. No, it's awesome.
Absolutely love it. So yeah, welcome to the Monty Python podcast. We're glad to have you all.
Oh wait, are we here to talk about video games? I thought anything was. All right.
So, yeah, I mean, I know Nick as well. You've got some questions listed out. So, do you want to ask a question from Mr. Isgreen first?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've known Adam at least online anyway for a little bit, but like one thing we don't really know about you is how you got into the industry.
A dog has shown up. Anyway, so how did I get into the industry? So I was going to school for film, and I'm full disclosure, I was a really bad student when I was a kid. I was great in the things that I loved to do, and everything else I was like, why am I doing this? This is really boring. And so I was taking time off from school, and I was working 2 jobs, and it was miserable, like 7 days a week, and there was an ad in the paper for a writer/game designer that I sent off just a resume. I mean, I didn't have any experience. I sent like a game idea and a short film thing that I had done and a bunch of stuff and just sent it off. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I think that same week I also sent off a application to be a tester at EA because this was in the Bay Area in the early 90s. And I got a call back from SSI, Strategic Simulations, and they were like, hey, we'd like you to come in for an interview. You sent all this cool stuff. You seem... And I did, and I went down, and I could talk games. I mean, I played so many games growing up since I was a kid, since the Atari 2600, that I could talk anything. Like, oh, yeah, this, and I think at the time it was Ultima 8 and Ultima 7 were hot, and SSI makes role-playing games, and we were talking about the gold box games, and we were talking about role-playing and da-da-da-da, and they were like, I guess they were impressed, because like a couple weeks later, I got a call back, and they're like, "Hey, we'll offer you the job for less money." And so they stiffed me. I got into the industry. They're like, "We're gonna give you this salary," and of course, it was like, I think it was like $25,000 a year in 1993 dollars, right? But they're like, "We can only pay you 23."
That's not too bad, is it?
Well, like I said, half of my income was going just to pay for my studio apartment in Sunnyvale when I moved down there. But so I started in January '93, working at SSI, working on, as they were rolling off the Gold Box role-playing games, and worked on. My first project was canceled, actually. It was called M, and it was a science fiction role-playing game set in the Centurion universe, which is the same one that FASA has for their tank combat game. Not their mech combat game, but their tank combat game. So that was a little wacky. And then that kind of all fell apart, and I ended up moving on to Dark Sun, which was the first game that I shipped. And that was toward the end of 93, maybe 94. I don't remember. But so I was at SSI for a while, and I worked on a whole bunch of role-playing games and strategy games and a flight sim that we did and a bunch of crazy games ideas. And then I really loved everyone at SSI, but I felt like I wasn't being challenged anymore. And I'd been playing a lot of Dune 2 on the PC, and a bunch of people at work had. And Westwood actually did work for SSI, so they do ports for SSI back in the day. And so everyone there kind of knew Westwood, and I was like, I'm going to apply to Westwood. Oh my God, what am I doing? And so I did, and same thing. I got an interview, and I flew down to Vegas, met everybody there, had a great interview, and then ended up taking a job at Westwood.
Wow, gross.
Yeah, no, and you guys know Westwood Studios. Like, Westwood Studios is, it was amazing. Like, it was such a great group of just super passionate. Well, I got to back it up. Everywhere I've worked has been full of super passionate, amazingly cool people. But Westwood just had an interesting way it worked with like conflicting personalities and personalities that got along and those that did. But everybody kind of, no matter what, how the personalities clash, everyone came together to make great games. Yeah. And so, I was at Westwood for a long time until EA bought us, and then they wanted to consolidate us. So they moved half of us to Redwood Shores and the other half to EA Los Angeles. So I ended up in Los Angeles working on, let's see, at that point it was Generals had just shipped that Westwood Pacific did, and I ended up going there, and then all of us got together and did 0 Hour for Generals. So a lot of people, when they think about Generals, they're like, oh, it didn't necessarily feel like a Westwood game. And I love Generals to death. I think that the Westwood Pacific team did a great job, but like 0 Hour was like all of the old Westwood crew kind of coming in and working on it as well, and I think that's where it got a little more crazy and a little more fun.
There was a little bit more magic inserted.
It was a little more, well, like the thing that I think that Westwood really stood for, and that I love about Westwood, and I still try to do in everything I do, is just emotional output. Like, something in the game makes you feel an emotion, right? Happy, sad, whatever, but that there's a kind of a real roller coaster of emotions as you're playing through games. And that's something that Westwood really tried to do in spades. Like, I would, if someone was like, is your game as well balanced as, say, a craft game like a Command & Conquer game? I would say, no, they're not as balanced, but I bet you'll have more crazy emotional swings during the course of a game than you would in a typical game.
I still remember. I still have ridiculously fond memories. Like, I got a thing with my brothers. We used to play the original Command & Conquer, and there's that bit where the flop-haired guy who represents GDI. Is it GDI?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, GDI would never harm children. And it's because they had that whole weird plot where the evil guys like made it look like GDI had bombed
propaganda,
like a family, and I was like, oh my god. And I was only like 10 or something, I don't know, but like I remember like we used to watch that like FMV and crack up because it was really badly acted.
I'm really excited to see the remasters that EA is doing of CNC and Red Alert. I'm really curious what they're going to do with the videos, right? And like how they're going to bring it back. It's fun though. I just had to sign a release for because my voice is in Red Alert. I'm the voice of the spy in Red Alert. So that cheesy Sean Connery that you hear in Red Alert, that on my way, that's me. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So wow, they still had to get in touch with you about that.
Yeah, they did. So I had to sign a release just like a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Hey, we're not going to pay you." And I'm like, "I don't care. Just this is awesome. Just keep me in the game. That's super cool. I love that. Like that I'm immortalized as in Red Alert for one of the voices." But yeah, no, it's Westwood was amazing and it was great. And then it got broken up and it was sad and everyone moved on. And I was at EA for a couple years, and then I left EA. Well, EA fired me actually because they said they weren't going to make any more. They weren't going to make any more real-time strategy games, and I said, okay, that's cool. Like, if you're not going to do that, I really don't want to work on.
I was just about
Medal
to
of
ask
Honor.
you, like, so do you think EA deserves its title as the villain of the industry? And you're like,
I don't know. That's a tough one, right? Like working within EA, there are a lot of really good people that, and like Laura Miele, who runs like all of publishing now for EA. She's amazing. She was our marketing lead at Westwood, and she's great. Like there are a lot of people that just want to make good games. So it's so easy to bash. I mean, people bash on Microsoft all the time too, right? That,
that's one of the reasons this
I'm always
podcast exists.
Well, it's I'm always fascinated with like this. Some people have this. I know some of it's probably just uninformed, but it's always funny to hear people that think that a bunch of us at major companies are like twisty mustache villains from like Snidely Whiplash or something, right? Like we're going to destroy all these companies, right? Like no one does that. Right? Like, that's
Papa EA meme.
Yeah, that's
Take you to the pit.
brutal. Oh my god, yeah. But like it's that's not the way the companies work, right? I mean, yes, there's a lot of them. Some of them might be a little more driven by profits, or kind of trying to be a little more predatory. And I'm not thinking of EA when I say that. There's some other companies, I think in the mobile space, that were a little more like that back in the day. But they're full of people that just want to make great games, and yeah, it's been fun. I mean, like, but I was at EA anyway, and then they let me go, and then they were like, wait, come back. And I was like, no, I'm done. And so I ended up at Petroglyph, which was a bunch of people from Westwood that didn't leave Vegas, and worked on the Empire at War game there, Star Wars Empire at War, and then we did Forces of Corruption, which was an awesome sequel. I don't know if you ever played it, but we added like basically a cartel faction to the Star Wars universe. So we had the Empire and we had the Rebels, and then we had the cartel, and the cartel was like all underground. They were using all this tech you weren't supposed to use. So we grabbed stuff from all the different films and everything. It was great. Like working with Lucas is a lot of fun because you can go and like, hey, could we do something crazy? Like, we wanted to put in a bonus mission in Star Empire in the first game that you played Boba Fett, and you just got to go around flamethrowing Ewoks like on a whole map. That was the whole thing, and we didn't get that.
Sounds like the predecessor to No Russian.
I don't know if it's that. That's that's a little. I don't know if I could make that jump. That's kind of far.
The Star Wars equivalent of No Russian.
Flamethrowing Ewoks to No Russian. Maybe. Okay. Yeah. I could. Okay. I'll give you a point on that. I'll give you a point. The funny thing was that they're like, no, I think that's too far. But then they let us put in an Ewok handler in the cartel, and this guy literally had a giant bag he dragged around with Ewoks with explosive collars on them.
Oh my god!
And he would open up the bag and throw out an Ewok, and the Ewok would run, and do their little like, and they would detonate.
Arguably, that's so darker than No Russian.
Jesus.
I know, right? And the guy would say, I think we had some dialogue too that was like, it's a shame to put a good Ewok to, like he was always talking about like wasting the Ewoks and stuff. And, off you go, little feller, and like, when they blow up.
God.
How did they?
God, it was so wrong.
How did a smaller startup studio like that get the license for Star Wars?
Well, I mean, Petroglyph put together an amazing pitch. They went to, at the time it was Lucas. They went to Lucas with this pitch. They had Petroglyph has some amazing programmers at it, and they built this cinematic combat mode for space combat in an RTS, but with ships. So literally you had dogfights like you have in the movies, but they were all automatically generated for TIE fighters and X-Wings and Star Destroyers shooting in and everything. And it was amazing. Like, you could just watch it. It's all built into the game, too. So if you ever load the game up, you can check it out. I think you hit the space bar, and you'll go into the cinematic mode. And it finds like they actually had patents on the logic because it would find interesting combats and then zoom in on those and like jump you around and show you all the cool stuff that was happening. And it was great. Like it was amazing. And I think it just blew Lucas away. And they were like, oh my God, this is awesome. Cool. But yeah, it was really fun. Like we got to, you get to extend the lore. And of course it's all extended universe now. So it's not like official canon, but it's fun to like say like, hey, we put some stuff into the Star Wars universe. Yeah, and anyway, so I'm sorry, I'm like, this is super long-winded. I don't know if you.
No,
really
it's all good. It's all good.
It's fine. Okay, well.
No, keep going.
So anyway, I was at Petroglyph for years, and then my friend Brett Sperry, the guy who started Westwood, and one of my friends, Rade Stojsavljevic, who's a producer at the time, who he and I were kind of the ones who tag teamed to finish Tiberian Sun and do Firestorm and all the stuff on that. We're like, hey, this whole mobile thing, because the iPhone had just come out, and we're like, what about mobile gaming? Like, maybe we should do something. And so we started a company called Jet Set Games, and we did a couple of little apps and games for the phone. And unfortunately, we just couldn't make it work. I think the fascinating thing about moving from like PC development or console development to a mobile game is there's a very big philosophy shift that it's like, on a mobile game, you generally get the game done and then you ship it and then you keep iterating on it rather than like, oh, we got to be perfect. Everything's got to be amazing. And so working on PC gaming, we just had the wrong mentality and it totally killed us because we were just thinking, okay, everything's got to be this and it's got to be big and blah. And we're like, no, we got to make things simple. And we did learn that lesson too late. And so while we were doing that, I got approached by Microsoft when things were kind of going and we're like, I don't know if this was going to work out. And Microsoft approached me too because they were launching the Windows Phone, and they're like, "Hey, you've done mobile and you've done all this stuff." I came up and I had 9 hours of interviews straight.
Wow,
which was mind. Wow, it was awesome.
Jesus.
So it was amazing, right? Like so, and I don't say that in a bad way. I'm actually very complimentary of all the people that I talked to because I felt dumb, right? And I loved that. Yeah. Like I hadn't felt really stupid. Like there are times at Westwood where Brett would call me out on something and be like, "Did you think I'd like walk into his room like, okay, let's talk about this design for whatever it was." And he's like, "What about blah?" And it's like something I completely out of left field did not even think about in my design. I'd just be like, "Okay, I'm leaving. All right, I'll be back later." And I just walk out. I'm like, "Forget it. Like I got to think about this now." But yeah, coming to Microsoft, like I felt dumb. There's so many smart people here,
it's like the imposter in the room syndrome, right? You kind of
I get
that at work all the time. I'm sitting at the boardroom and people are talking, and I'm like, I should not be here.
Right? Like I still get that. I like imposter syndrome. I totally get that still. Where I'm like, oh my god, why hasn't anyone fired me yet? Like, how am I here? No, but Microsoft it was amazing just coming up and like I felt dumb and I'm like, oh my god, I love this. Yeah. Like I have so much to learn. And that's the great thing is there are some super great people that I've been exposed to over the years. I just passed my 9-year anniversary at Microsoft just a month ago. Wow. So yeah, I know time flies, right?
It's funny because this is not many people know this because it's not something I've usually talked about, but I actually secretly applied for a job at Rare, like, and it was really out there, right? I'm a huge nerdy Sea of Thieves fan, like I stand for that game so hard, right? And but it's me speaking personally. I play Sea of Thieves, and I'm like, there's so much more that could be done, and obviously I know that they know that, right? And they had this application, and I still I had this moment where I was like, you guys are just collecting ideas. There isn't a real job at the end of this. But it was a game design application, and they were like, the way to apply, we're looking for everyone from all walks and breadths of life. Write a design document. And I put together over a weekend this 8-10 page, these are the things I would add, and this is how I would implement the game systems, and I wrote all these different bits in, and I didn't hear anything, but I at the same time it's like pipe dreams, like I'm nearly 40, I've got 2 kids, I've never worked in the game industry, I know nothing. It was just like fuck it, I'll give it a go. So I did. So it did make me giggle at the time because I was like, maybe I'll be lucky.
Well, I mean, like, that's kind of how I got into the industry, right?
You never know.
Well, back in the day, there were no degrees, right, in video. Exactly. When I got in, like 93. Yeah, so 93, there was no, you couldn't get a degree in video games in '93, right? So everyone I knew was all like, yeah, I was a film student, or yeah, I was a psychology major, or I got my degree in history, or there are all these different. Some were programmers that moved into design, but a lot of them, just came from all these different walks of life that just loved video games.
Yeah,
and
that's the
I
thing.
mean,
it's I think that's as long as you've got that mindset. And you can think about the bigger problems in that way, then it's all good. I mean, I'm looking at your list of projects. I mean, and you've touched upon a number of them, and like there are some amazing games on your list of games that you've worked on, right? I mean, this is absolutely nuts. I mean, out of all of them, do you have like a highlight that you're like, that game for me was like super in my heart?
There's so many. I've been fortunate to work on a lot of really great games, and I consider myself really lucky that I've just happened to be in the right place at the right time to do games that have been great. I think that probably for me, one of my favorites of all time was Red Alert, like the first Command & Conquer Red Alert, and I say that simply because, and also I think Killer Instinct as well is another one, but I'll get to that one in a second. Like Red Alert was so fun because there's a lot of parallels actually between KI and Red Alert in some ways. Like I created a lot of I worked with the guys that were writing the whole universe, right? Like Tanya was a creation of mine. The German Shepherds are in because I have, you saw my dog is a German Shepherd when he came in. Like, I'm a big fan of those dogs, and we figured out how to do the dog spy thing and all that. Tesla coils, like Red Alert was fun because when I got to Westwood, they were just calling it CNC World War One, and they were like, we're gonna make the real history version, like the real World War One version of Command and Conquer. And I was like, I just came from SSI, right, where they do those games down to the point of like this tank has this much gasoline and it can shoot this many rounds and you have to resupply, and right, like Panzer General and those kind of games where it's super accurate, like to the vehicles. And I was like, can we have a little more fun? Like, can we just get a little crazy? Like, what if, and then that's when we all started pitching on the, like, what if every crazy conspiracy theory from World War II was real, right? Like, what would that do to a game? And then I was like, so, and I'm a big movie fan, so I'm like, the Philadelphia experiment had this crazy thing with people merged into the metal, and what if gave the Allies like a chronosphere? They could teleport things, but there was all this danger to it, and then I remember Ed Del Castillo, who was the producer, he's the one who actually pitched the whole Einstein going through time and assassinating Hitler. Except he did it with like a guy actually setting up a sniper rifle, and then you never got to see them until the very end, and like he's in a window and you can hear this Hitler giving a speech, and then bang, and then you see it's Einstein. And so we kind of we're like, that's a little violent for Einstein. I think that even people, the Einstein Foundation might have a problem with that. Like so. We kind of rejiggered it, but no, it was fun because it was just this great merger of a lot of really crazy ideas. Whereas, you can look at Command and Conquer kind of like, if you look at the two, it's kind of like Forza and Forza Horizon, right? It's like Command and Conquer was very much like, hey, this is more serious, right? It's still campy, but it's like, this is more serious. And then Red Alert was like, we're just going crazy. We're just going to have fun. Like, capital F, fun, like, woo, just out there. And I think that's, like Horizon, like like you guys have played Forza and Forza Horizon, right? Like Forza's like the ultimate track experience. It's super buttoned up. It's really awesome. And then you get Horizon. It's like, okay, now you go off road and have fun and just do whatever, drive a,
there's Lego.
And now there's
Lego. Exactly, Lego, right? The Hot Wheels expansion, like
I showed my kid and he was like, "It's my Hot Wheels." I was like, "Yeah, it is. Come and sit on my lap and let's play this thing." I mean, he's only 5.
Yeah, I think I actually have some of the cars like from when I was a kid, and they're actually in the thing because like the green monster, and I forget what the names are, but I don't like the purple one with all the giant exhausts, and I'm like, oh my god, I have this, like, I'm like give it to my son or something like that, like because I've got boxes of all my old toys when I was a kid, but so it was Red Alert was one of the ones that was really fun for me. Killer Instinct was also just being able to take a franchise that was kind of dead, right, and be able to respect what was, and I think all of the work that I'd done on like Star Wars games and James Bond and the other times I got to play around with licenses, kind of really, I got a lot of respect for trying to preserve what was great about something without breaking it, right, and yet being able to modernize. And so, Killer Instinct was just a great experience. Again, great team, amazingly passionate people. Double Helix was amazing. Iron Galaxy is amazing, and just being able to kind of really like make characters like Hisako is myself and Chad Green, the art director, created that character, right? So like her look, her backstory, like I have a figure down in my downstairs, right, in my gaming area that it's like from a character in a game. That's so, I kind of geek out on that, right? Like I've been in the industry. It's just awesome.
The thing I loved about Hisako was that she seemed to fit in so well into the existing roster. Like, if you didn't know any better, you would have thought she was already carried from the original games.
Yeah. Yeah, and Iron Galaxy did a great job, like, bringing her to life. I mean, they're the ones who added all the cool moves and the crawls and everything. We just started with concept art and kind of backstory and kind of how we wanted the character to play a little bit. And that was, working with them as well. But it's just cool to, have something like, I created a lot. Like, we set up the KI universe to be very much, the parallel was kind of Marvel, right? It's like, okay, we've got, good characters, we've got bad characters, we have chaos characters, they all have different interactions, they all got different backstories. We can tell all these different stories, we could go all these places. So that was really fun. I mean, like, being able to, like, create like that, like, kind of just, like, pure creation has always been something that I get a lot of enjoyment out of. I
love the fact that you can, you can take an IP like KI and you can grab, and it's almost like Smash Brothers, right? You can just grab, we'll stick Arbiter in, we'll stick General Ram in, we'll stick, is it Bash from Battletoads? Was it Bash or Rash?
Rash. Yeah.
Rash. And he goes in, and it's like, that works. You don't think, well, that's weird. You just think, that's fine.
You're like, wait a minute.
And I absolutely love that. I think and obviously, we have to ask this because I'm sure you've seen the online campaign that Maximilian Dude started.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's awesome KI. That Max has been doing all this.
Do you agree with the sentiment that KI should probably be
look, I would love there to be more KI. Because I'm in a different group now, right? I'm in the Age of Empires group.
Of course.
I'm not in publishing anymore. So what they're going to do with KI, that's up to publishing, and we'll figure out what they're going to do. But I would love to see more KI. I mean, I love the game.
So
they're great fans. It's a wonderful. I love what Max did with the whole Bring Back KI thing. It's awesome to see everyone kind of. And there is something special about KI that I just love that the fights are interesting because there's all this two-way interaction, which is something that, even the old ones had. Maybe a little bit harder, right? Especially KI2 had a lot of hard counter systems, which Ken Lobb and I got in a whole bunch of arguments about while we were making the game because he was like, no, it's just got to be hard counter. I'm like, no one wants to play that anymore. Like, we can't do that to people. No, it's great. Like, everyone on the team, it just, everyone, like I said, at Double Helix, everyone at Iron Galaxy, they just really put so much love into that game. And it really shows. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I know all you guys, you play so many games, and you can feel, when someone really, like, when a team loves a game that they're making, you can kind of feel it. It kind of comes through. Yeah.
It does.
And I think that's one of the things I love about KI is you can kind of feel that there's a lot of love that went into making the game.
Yeah.
I know. You can tell they care about the fighting system in it, though. Like, it's so in depth. It's unreal.
I think as well that I'm terrible at fighting games, right? And I know Cairo, you probably play quite a few fighting games. You're way more into that than me. But like the fact that they have all of those systems that let you learn. And you think now, I even now, and that game came out in 2013, the systems that they had to enable players, like hitboxes, frames, all of that kind of stuff is in there. It was in there from the day, and then it only improved. And yet there are games being released like now that don't have those systems, and it just goes to show how kind of forward-thinking the team that put that game together was to try and fighting games is a niche market, but let's try and bring in people and make them learn the ropes. I think that's a great mantra to have.
And still the best netcode going around for a fighter.
Yeah, we bent definitely over backwards for that. We really, really wanted the netcode. That was one of our priorities, was netcode. Like, we want this to be the best netcode. What do we need to do? And
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, the tutorial was another one. Like, I love fighting games, but I'm not good at them. Like, I was good at Street Fighter 2 because that was when I was in college and stuff like that. I'd play a lot of that in the arcades and things like that at school and all. And that was super fun. I had a great time playing. But like Virtua Fighter 5 had an amazing tutorial system. And we're like, okay, this is kind of our model for what we want to do because it was so good and so in depth. But we wanted to educate people, right? Because I'm so tired of games that are like, oh, well, just learn how to do this combo. I'm like, when would I ever do this combo? Like, what situation makes this combo worthwhile? And no one would ever explain that.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, right? And I put myself in a new player's mind, and I'm like, how would you learn this? You would just get frustrated, unless you were, with somebody like sitting next to him, and like, oh, dude, see, you do this when this, and so yeah, we really wanted to try to do something, and it is disappointing. Like, there's games like Skullgirls that does an amazing job with their tutorial, and they have amazing netcode as well. There's, Killer Instinct. Mortal Kombat stepped up. Like, their netcode was really bad in, was it 9? And then Ed Boon and team was like, this is unacceptable. And everyone, they'd always have, on forums, they'd be like, hey, what's got the best netcode? What's got the worst for fighting games? And it would be like, Killer Instinct would be in one of the top. And MK would always be at the bottom. And like, Mortal Kombat has the worst netcodes, crap. And they turned it around. Like, they went to a completely new solution. Like, and props to them, right?
Yeah,
they did great stuff.
I mean, and you got to be able to be willing to kind of go, right, what's my weaknesses? Where can I improve? And it's all about that iteration.
Yeah. And they did that like in the middle.
Sakurai could learn that for Smash.
I know, right? Like Smash, Arc is hit or miss for me. Like, I love Arc System Works games. Capcom, they should probably do something about their netcode. It would be cool, little bit, right? Yeah, and training.
Speaking of
Capcom's never been great at their training modes. Arc has always been awesome at, like, crazy tutorials where you're like, oh my god, I can learn everything. And that seems to be a philosophy thing that they have in all their games. But yeah, I would love to see more of that. I wish more fighting games would kind of look at others and be like, we could learn something here. Let's make this better, right? Sometimes it happens, but not all the time.
Rising tide lifts all boats, doesn't it?
Sorry, Kari?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think that Killer Instinct got as popular as it did, not because of its great tutorial or anything like that, but because the game made it so easy for someone who didn't know how the hell to play a fighting game to pick up a controller and just play.
Mm-hmm.
Because combos are easy to execute. Just being able to like pick up, most of the characters aren't really that complicated, at least the base roster ones. They didn't get super complicated until like season 2, season 3. And even then, like, Arbiter has his the grenades, right?
Mm-hmm.
The plasma
grenades. It's got a carbine.
The rifle.
Yep, carbine rifle.
And like, he's probably, I think, the most complicated character in the game, if I remember right. But even then, he wasn't that complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, at least compared to some of the gimmicks that other fighting games have introduced, like, they keep trying to make Smash more complicated by introducing weird freaking gimmicks on some of the characters. The latest one, Hero, has that randomizer thing, which is dumb.
They got him banned.
Banned from all competitive. He's banned from all competitive tournaments because no one likes him.
Is Banjo?
Well, the funny
I don't know about Banjo. I don't know what Banjo's gimmick is because I haven't played Banjo yet.
I've only seen, I watched the direct and saw Banjo. It was awesome to see Banjo in there, and I love all of the detail they put into and the mad shout out to like, hey, go play Banjo and Kazooie on Xbox. I couldn't believe that. I thought that was Microsoft. A joke. I was like, oh, that's so cool. But it's funny because I saw one press piece that came out. I don't remember where it was from, and it was like, Banjo his moves aren't like technical enough, and I was like, really? Do you need, like, I know every character doesn't want to have that, but I was like, is that really a bad thing? Like, having characters that are accessible?
Yeah.
Like,
it's the situation of like, at least in my opinion, it's a situation of trying to take a game, and a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, trying to take a game that was casual and make it competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And trying to bridge that gap means that you are inevitably going to go up against people who know a lot about the competitive scene, who know what it takes to make a good fighting game, even though, like, most of those guys are just high-tier players, and they never really made a fighting game, But they know how they work so intuitively. And you're trying to appease them with a game that isn't built for that. Ostensibly isn't built for that. And going back to KI, the way that you guys made how easy it was to approach the game, how easy it was for someone who never played fighting games before to just pick up a controller and play, helped emphasize how much they needed to learn to become pro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the range of skills you could have at that game is just insane. And I actually want to springboard off this to ask a question that I've had in my mind since the beginning of this podcast. with all these little like minor issues with game design, like in Smash and in other games, right? What is your biggest pet peeve, mechanic, game design principle, biggest like thing you don't like?
The biggest thing
game design in general.
About game design in general.
Not just the development process, but even like gameplay, like specific systems
that have been implemented.
Oh.
Yeah.
I hate I'm not a fan of permadeath unless the game really supports it. Like a game like Rogue Legacy or something like that, where you die but you get your money and then you can upgrade. You know, like Dead Cells, I think is an amazing game, right? And it's technically permadeath, although it's kind of like, no, you don't lose everything. Like I could never go back to a game like Rogue where it's just like, and you're dead, right? And it's like, oh, I get nothing out of that. That permadeath is something that I don't really like. I don't like generally the philosophy of learning by death. I'm not really okay with. It's funny. Like I gotta be honest. I was not okay with it at all until Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, all the Souls games, because I was like, learning by death. I'm like, but then I'm like, wait, I actually did learn something. Let me slow down. Like, oh yeah, that attack. And once you got into the philosophy of learning, because that game was all about like overcoming these crazy challenges, then I was like, okay, you know what? Learning by death can be okay in certain games if the whole game is based around the idea of you dying and learning and going back.
Yeah.
So
it's just, there have been games that have done it poorly.
Did you play Zombie U?
Yes, I did.
I thought Zombie U did it really well. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, where you could you die and then you could get back and get all your stuff from the previous
zombie.
person. Yeah, and you'd have to kill them.
Yeah.
And other games have borrowed that, right? Hollow Knight kind of has the spirits too, when you die and you have to get back and kill your little ghost in order to get your energy back and everything. Zombie, right? Zombie.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Because I didn't play it on the Wii. I didn't own a Wii U actually. I owned a Wii, and then I'm like, I don't Wii U. I never owned one.
A bit of a misstep, right?
I got it when it came out on Xbox.
Yeah, I picked up the
Wii
Steam
U version.
version.
Was great because the gamepad became your inventory system. So you'd go down to the gamepad to start grabbing your stuff and shifting it around, but the game is still going in the background. Yep. So you got to you're looking down, but then you got to look up to make sure no zombies are coming, and it actually adds to the whole experience. It's really, really cool. I loved it.
That's cool.
A lot of people complained about that because they thought it was distracting from the action, but it's like,
that's the whole
point. At that point, you're just complaining about like the point of the game.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe this game isn't for you. You should go find something else.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was
at first. Me personally, I think
I was going to say at first it was a bit jarring because you're not used to that. You're used to the game catering to you and your convenience. So you pause it for your inventory and whatever. But, so at first it's like I'm going into my inventory and then I'm seeing in my peripheral vision that there's this zombie coming, and I'm like, shit, hold on a second.
Wait, what?
Well, wasn't it to emulate that whole, you're a survivor, you get your backpack and you're looking through, like, what can I grab? It was to emulate that kind of like, in real life you wouldn't necessarily be focused on the environment around you. But I thought it was a clever design decision to differentiate. It's definitely a good use of that design gimmick around the Wii U console, as much as it didn't necessarily work out for Nintendo. But hey, they're back with a vengeance, so good for them.
Well, I mean, you've probably seen that cartoon they have where like they've got the picture of the Wii U, and then they have all the like angry Japanese businessmen. They're like, and then you see them cut like the sides off of it, and suddenly the controllers are separate, and they're like, oh, they're like super like, oh my god, and it's totally true, right? They took the Wii U and just went boop, and like boop, and then like, oh hey, we have a. And they did, it's awesome. I'm so happy to see that the Switch is doing so well, and it's, it's my go-to travel system now that I take with me anywhere I go, right?
Obviously, and Microsoft did
so many great. I mean, like Deadly Premonition came out yesterday on it, and they're doing a sequel to Deadly. So Swery's gonna be. Oh man, I'm so happy. That guy is so awesome.
They're doing it.
And
what a surprise that was. It was like Shadow Drop. There you go.
If only
out of nowhere, right?
System actually was worth it.
I'm so happy. Like, that game is so out there, crazy awesome. I just want more of that. I'm so glad that Swery's involved with it, too. Like, I can't wait to see where they're going to go with it.
Yeah. I had a question about what it's like for doing this. So I know that you were, I think, you're creative director or in some form on Ori and the Blind Forest and the phenomenally looking upcoming Will of the Wisps. But Moon is a studio that is quite unique in that they have no fixed head office. They're not all crammed together in a room making games.
Nope.
They work all over the globe, different time zones, hours. What is it like managing that kind of or being part of that project, and how does it present challenges for Microsoft in the way that they would normally inherently approach like projects like that? Is it a bit of a weird one where you kind of go, we trust you guys, here's go, or is it?
Well, I mean,
how does that work?
Yeah, so we have partners all over the world that work with Microsoft, and Microsoft has offices all over the world as well. And so there are always challenges with time zones sometimes where, right now it's, for you, John, it's what? How early in the morning
6 a.m.
is it?
My kids will be awake in an hour, but I've
6
locked
a.m.
the door. They can't get anywhere.
Right, it's 10 p.m. It's 10 p.m. here. Nick, what is it in Australia?
It's 3 o'clock. Yep, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Yep.
Right, and you're on the West Coast as well, right? So we're both on the West Coast. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're having this chat. We just kind of make it work.
Yeah.
The great thing about the Moon team is the Moon team they knew what they wanted to do, and Tomas is amazing. All of their team is incredible. And everything was on Discord / Slack / Skype / whatever communication tool they wanted to use, and they would just do everything there, and everything was connected. My involvement was generally with Tomas and with user research and just discussing game design and this is too hard. That was a common we need people want to win this.
That fucking Ginso tree, man.
Ginso tree, that was the make or break. Were you going to be with the game or not? It was the Ginso tree. And they've learned a lot. It'll be awesome when people start to get to see more and play more of Will of the Wisps, because
I can't wait.
They
so good.
You just have no idea. I can't.
Oh
my god!
I played a demo at PAX Australia last year, and it was really.
Oh, did you?
Really
Okay.
good.
Okay. Was that with the sand burrowing, where you could burrow around in the sand? Is that what
that
was?
No. It was almost like not an underground bit, but there was a hell of a lot of those spiked plants, and you had to sort of try and get around them. And it was. I loved
it.
And
the new weapon system and everything,
Yes.
and the whole. There's a whole bunch of I mean, they've done so many cool things to the game, and the game is. Tomas.
Stunning.
I think Dan, the producer, we were working on the achievements because Tomas and team is always like, "Hey, you guys do the achievements. You guys love doing achievements," and so that's my one thing, that my major contribution to Will of the Wisps is working with Dan, the producer here on our side, and doing all the achievements for Will of the Wisps and figuring out what they were going to be and all this. But it was great because he loaded up the game. You could load up the game and kind of go into debug and zoom out and see all the maps and everything. And they're like, just for a joke, they're like, okay, so here's the original game. It's like this much of my screen. Let's say this is the entire screen you're seeing, right? Here's Will of the Wisps. I mean, here's Ori and the Blind Forest. And then boop, here's Will of the Wisps. It's the whole screen, and I'm like, oh my god, you guys made it huge. And there's so much stuff to find, and I'm not gonna say anything else about the game, but it's I think, I mean, you can see that they pour so much love into their games, and it's been amazing to work with Moon Studios, and they're buttoned up, and they've come a long way, from when they started. It was just assembly of people, but. The first E3 that we showed Ori and the Blind Forest, that's when the team actually, some of them met for the first time. They'd never actually met physically before. They all flew to E3, and some of them, it was the first time they've been in America, and a lot of them, they never met face to face because they've all been doing everything distributed.
And that shows the evolution of technology to enable people to work nowadays, right? I mean, I work from home a lot. And it's no different to being in the office. You're there, you're plugged in, you can see what you need to see, you can access what you need to access, and it just works. But the fact that they can build something that complex, arguably, It's not an Excel spreadsheet here.
At that level of quality as well.
It blows my mind. And I know people often make the distinction between AA and AAA and whatever. Like, and that normally that genre is like, it's a really polished Metroidvania, whatever. But you can't call it AAA. Like, I completely disagree. The level of quality and polish for that genre, I mean, it just screams. That investment and that quality that you would normally get from the big boys in the publishing industry.
I mean,
I can't wait to play.
What do you guys think about the whole moniker of AAA? I'm curious because, to me, I'll just give you an example. Like for me, the orange box, right, came out. Valve shipped this. Portal was on it, right? Portal was a 3-hour experience. The graphics were cool, but it wasn't anything mind-blowing. Yeah. But the experience was so amazing, right? Like. So mind-blowing that you were like, oh, I have to think what? Yeah. Like 3-dimensional, oh my God. And that song that capped it at the end. And I'm like, to me, that's AAA. Like, that was absolutely an experience I'd never had before. Like, it was worth the $60 for the orange box just for that.
It was
3
like
hours.
It was like the star of the whole package.
You're like, I don't need to play anything else. Like, I know Half-Life's on here and all the expansions and all this other stuff. I'm like, who cares? Like, Portal, oh my God.
Kairo's standing for Team Fortress 2
I know, you can see Kairo's
He's like,
no. That's not the Team Fortress 2 thing. That's, I debate the 3 hours on Portal because it took me 3 hours to beat level 18. Because, like, it went from level 17, which was fairly, like, short. Like, not short. Like, pretty in line with the previous levels, and then level 18 was literally 4 friggin' parts, and it took forever to figure out what the heck I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Which one was 18?
And
I
then
can't
level
remember the exact level.
18 was like, it was the multi-part one. I remember it opening up where there was a section you had to do that was entirely like over this pit of acid. Right.
Okay.
And there was these platforms suspended up in the air, and you had to figure out a way to get on those platforms.
Yeah. Okay,
right?
So you had to do like velocity maintaining, and like
kid,
fall
my
and
dad,
warp and launch
on Steam, and he's plus 60 plus, right? And he was like, like I really get it. He loves lateral thinking puzzles, and he was like, this is really cool and it's very funny. The computer's trying to kill me, but I don't have the dexterity to click here, click here, click here, click here. I think it's the one where you use the velocity to kind of like, you have to immediately look up and shoot the portal, and then you go through it, and then when you're going down you have to shoot, and then and he couldn't quite get it, and he got stuck, and I had to go around there and be like, right, look, right, there you go, you're through, carry on. And he loved the game, but yeah, I think that's the level you're talking about. It's got like this section.
No, yeah, that is, yeah. Portal 2 is the evolution of everything that was great about Portal 1. The puzzles might be slightly easier in some respects, but the story and the just the way that game is.
I think Portal 2
definition
was
of
like the comedic.
The last game Valve ever made. I'm going to go on the record. It's the last game Valve ever made. But to the distinction of AAA and AA that you were asking,
most people refer to budget. Most people refer to budget.
Yeah, most people refer to budget.
No, right?
And like, to me, it's less about budget, more about polish.
Yeah. Or what it does to the genre. I think for me.
I mean, there's a lot of AAA games nowadays that are launching like fairly broken. So I mean, at that point, I can't really say are these AAA games. I mean, sure, and like budget, that's about it. They're pretty like if I was paying $60 for these, I'd be wasting my money on a game that I could probably get for $30 in early access. You know, and it had the same level of polish. So
yeah, I think AA and AAA, aside from being batteries, the whole premise, it seems to, it's certainly in online conversations and forums like Reset Era, you often see fanboys picking up their pitchforks and arguing whether this game deserves the distinction of being called AAA. But I mean, you look back to the 360 days with Xbox Live Arcade. And you had this renaissance of unique thoughts and designers and titles coming out that were polished, worked fantastically, but they were small. But they did what they set out to do. So stuff like Braid, when that came out, I wouldn't call it a AAA game in terms of budget, but when it came out, it captured people's imaginations because it did something that no one had seen in the way that it did it, and it was uniquely clever. And I played that game, and I love little platformers and things like that. You look at games like Inside, right? Not AAA by
Limbo.
budget, but what a unique achievement of art and direction and atmosphere. Like, why not? Why doesn't it deserve that moniker? I think that's something that needs to go. And I mean, I know the initiative, for example. I'm sure I read. I'm not sure if it was Phil that said it. Quadruple A. And I think that's just being used.
No idea.
As a premise to say, these guys are going to go out and take those unique indie games that maybe do these kind of really unique things, but we're going to do it at the scale that you would expect a bigger project to be. I'm fine with that.
I mean, at least I think we should probably do away with the whole AAA, AA stuff and go with something like Hollywood has done, where it's like the art house film, which is typically lower budget, but very focused on specific ideas.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they can be freaking amazing. Or you have the big blockbuster releases from the bigger studios, you know? Yeah. So I feel like the industry as a whole should probably shift away from that whole disingenuous moniker, because all it does is lead to classification wars.
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot. There's so many great games across so many systems. It's always frustrating to get into this thing, or the argument that's going on right now over does Gears have the best graphics, and people are pulling up images with little circle things you see this one thing right here, and I'm like,
so you saw that thread with the red circles and the ambient occlusion.
And I'm like, I'm like, okay, I mean, it's cool, it's all opinion, right? I mean a
screenshot of Gears comes up and everyone's suddenly just a graphical engineer and knows exactly what they're talking about.
Like, wow, it's this thing. And it's like, I play Borderlands and I love the way it looks, and it's not gonna, the cell shaded look is wonderful to me, and it fits the game, right? And just play the game. I mean, there's so many good looking games on so many systems.
I think it's weird that people really focus on that kind of stuff. It strikes me as well, that whole Gears graphics thread, and you've got people throwing out like, oh, well, look at what this game did. It's clearly uniquely better, but they're using an altered GIF that's been enhanced to look cool as a GIF, and it's like, well, that's not really representative, for one. Yeah, and B, they've got completely different objectives as games. Gears has a very almost stylized, semi-realistic graphical kind of world that they've realized, and they've merely refined on it. I mean, I've been playing Gears. I was playing with a friend of mine that we always co-op the campaigns together, and it got to about midnight my time, which was obviously only 6 hours ago. And I was like, I have a podcast in 4 hours. I need to sleep or I'll die. And he was like, and we just couldn't help it. We just closed off Act 1, and I was. And I want to mention this just briefly on Gears, and spoiler alert for people that haven't played Gears. If you're listening, I'll try not to spoil too much. There is a cutscene. I don't know how far you guys are in to Gears 5 yet.
I just finished Act 1 as well.
Right, so there's the cutscene, and I'm just going to call it the cutscene. The title of the cutscene is JD really up, right? He really does. And the tonal shift and what the designers and what the acting achieved was so above what a Gears game has done before. Like, we all remember when Maria died, and Dom's like, Maria! And it was kind of cheesy, and you're like, whatever. But I watched that cutscene, and I was like...
Yeah. When I was younger, I cried at that scene.
You nerd! But that cutscene in Gears 5...
I can admit that I've cried at a lot of games.
No, there's games have made me cry.
Yeah.
Only
Halo
one has
3
for me.
When
the end of Ico made me cry. That was awesome. The whole end after the credits with the Final Fantasy IX, the ending where it turned out that Vivi I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but there was a cool thing at the ending. No spoilers for Final Fantasy IX. No, there's some games that have totally done that to me.
I love that.
They just hit an emotional nerve.
For me, it was just Brothers.
Brothers was amazing.
When you realise when your brain connects that both sticks.
And then you're like, suddenly you have to do the other stick, and you're like,
he's still with me.
He's still with me. So good.
Brothers was good.
So
I love it.
I see you. You're kind of getting there.
So good.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I think that that's so great. It's so cool to see that video games have that power, right?
Yeah.
That they have that they can move that needle like that.
You kind of just wish more people saw it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? Like we just enjoy the experience rather than worrying about, what a leaf looks like or that this thing stuttered or that this is a 30 and this is
how
a
much
60.
my box is selling.
Not even to mention the control issues that people had with Red Dead Redemption 2 or anything around the gameplay. The moment I finished the story, I bawled for like a good 10 minutes because it was just so emotionally satisfying to see that payoff. But it was so bittersweet, And man, it was one of the most powerful moments in gaming in a really long time. Yes. I gotta say.
I mean, for me, my moments in gaming, some of them are story driven. Like, there are little moments that I fondly remember from Halo 3, like when he finds Cortana again and that little interaction. And there's bits like that, but for me, my memories and stuff that I really love about gaming is how much it brought a lot of amazing people into my life. Like when I was younger, I was like sort of 22, 23. We all played Halo 2 online, and we had this group of guys for about a year, and we were like, we've been playing for a year, and I just was like, hey honey, to my girlfriend at the time, I was like, can I invite a load of strange men to my house and we can LAN? And she was like, yeah, what's a LAN? And I was like, I'll explain later. So I threw this idea up on the Bungie.net forums to our little group, in our little group chat, and suddenly 8 of the guys were like, yeah, let's go. So these people turned up, and I'm opening my front door, and I'm like, and they're like, oh, it's Saucy Hot Dog and Omega Loki. I'm like, guys! And it was so odd at first, and then as we all settled in and, picked up our pads, and then suddenly it was like, you son of a... you're shouting at each other, and you're getting that trash talk going. And that spawned this huge group of people now. We've got like 30, 40 of us that we've been to each other's weddings. We've been through each other's divorces. Awesome. We lost one of our friends about a decade ago in Vietnam. It was really strange. He drowned in not Nam, the war. He drowned in a boat, and we all came together and like we're contributing.
Sucks.
And it that's what gaming did. And that blows my mind, and that's what I love about it more than anything else, is that it brought all these people together and enabled them to do these amazing things with each other. And that's my favourite thing that games can emotionally produce.
Speaking of Halo, though, I want to know if anyone else actually appreciated the scene at the end of Halo 4, where I think it was it Lasky was talking with Chief.
Yep.
Right after Cortana dies, and then you just get that scene of Chief by himself, and even though he still has the helmet on, you can just feel so much. You can feel so much emotion through that one scene, how it's shot. Honestly, that was like the moment where I thought 343 can really lead the franchise forward in storytelling. And then Halo 5 happened, and then rest is history.
Yeah, but you know what? Okay, we'll move Halo 5 aside for a second. Like the teaser for Halo Infinite with the guy in the ship that's like, please work, work, and the whole thing with his kid. You're like, oh, this is so good.
Beautiful. The best bit of that trailer,
so beautiful.
And a lot of people realised it was as he's watching it, and it revolves around as it comes back to him. It doesn't tell you. But his beard's suddenly grown, so it's kind of subtly saying he's been trapped out here a long time, watching this every day.
And I was
just like, what a unique piece of spin. I know people said, oh, why didn't we see gameplay? We know that's coming. E3 2020 is going to be a big one, but I for one,
343's got the chops.
I can't wait to see what that game is going to be, because I think I don't know. I know some of the guys at 343. I'm quite privileged to have done a lot of Forge stuff for some of the Sustain team. But I think Halo 4, they nailed story and emotional storytelling and characters. Halo 5, I personally feel they really nailed multiplayer in terms of what it means for competitive. The story, there were maybe some bits cut here and there, you could kind of feel it. But I think Halo Infinite, clearly conversations had, and I don't know for sure, we need more time. Let's make the game. And it feels kind of communicated this out anyway. Give them the time to make Halo the banner for like it used to be. It was, here is the game that defines the platform, and I can't help but feel that character in the Halo Infinite trailer, the bearded guy, he is going to be You know, and this is like Wild Dreams. I'm picturing this open world Halo, and I still don't know if it's open world, but I'm picturing he's going to be like your, you know, hey, pick me up, and he'll fly in, and he'll be like your base of operations, and you can use him to fast travel and stuff. It's just wild ideas popping in my brain.
Honestly, I don't.
The way that trailer was. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Go.
The way that trailer was shot, it gave me a lot of vibes of like, yeah, this character, the story behind this character is really important, and it's very emotional. But it felt like it was 343 saying, look at all these old fans that grew up with Halo, and now they're seeing the return of what they wanted, you know? Mm-hmm. And that telegraphed it so well for that trailer that you could see it online right after it premiered. Every big Halo guy that I've ever watched on YouTube, on Twitter, on whatever, right? They were all like, wow.
Yeah. You know, I loved watching the reaction
incredible
videos for the first Halo Infinite trailer when they were like, you know, it was the tech demo in the Slipstream engine, and you had all these like YouTubers streaming the conference, and they were like, "What is this? What is?" They had this moment of like, it's true. That's brilliant, and that Igorian, like the I think it's a major D or minor
dun,
D.
dun,
As I was like,
yeah.
It's good stuff.
But speaking of nostalgia, so you're working on ostensibly the next Age of Empires. Very nostalgic.
Working on the next Age of Empires.
Very nostalgic, very big thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like being in a position where you're managing an IP with so much history and so much like community fervor from the back?
Well, you know, the great thing about Age of Empires, and this is something that we really take to heart at the new studio, right, that's kind of managing and overseeing and working with our partners, is that, like, we very much want to have a conversation with all of our fans in terms of where we go with the game. There's so much love, and there's so many familial, wonderful stories that people share with us about Age of Empires, just in general. Like, anywhere I go, you know, I go to Gamescom, and someone's like, "Oh, you work on Age of Empires," and even if they don't really speak, you know, I don't speak German, unfortunately, so people will try to talk to me in German, and I'm like, "I'm not German. I'm sorry, do you speak English?" And like, "Oh, English." And, you know, some of them are, it's amazing how many people are so well and articulate, but some people aren't, but yet they still want to communicate with me because they just, they have all these emotions wrapped up in this. "Oh, I played with my dad, and you know, I used to sit on his lap and we'd play Age of Empires, and I loved the game and blah, and now it's, you know, I'm so excited for the new one." And there's this wonderful, like, love for Age of Empires, and our biggest thing that we want to make sure we maintain on all of the Age of Empires games is, like, we want to keep that. Like, we want people to still have that. And, you know, the definitive editions, you know, we're trying very hard to keep what's great about each game, but, like, make it awesome around, you know, do things. But 4 is like, all right, how do we just stoke everyone's love for the game and history, and, you know, how do we make it feel just as good as it has in the previous games? And it's challenging. I mean, you know, Relic takes it very seriously. They're doing a great job. You know, all of our teams that are working all over the place, you know, Australia with Tantalus, we've got Forgotten Empires, it's kind of distributed like Moon, right? They're all over the place. You know, we got Relic in Vancouver working on 4. Like, all of them are taking it very seriously and taking it to heart that, like, we have to make things that are great for the fans, and, like, making things for our customers. You know, like, even Satya from a Microsoft level has been like, you know, we want to be customer obsessed. We're obsessed with the customer. And I think that that's awesome. And that's come down to the games as well, where, especially for us, you know, being a new studio, we can kind of reset our DNA on, like, this is what we're about. And a big part of it is, like, we want to make our customers happy. We want to give them what they want. We want to make great games. And so we do a lot of that. I mean, you know, but it's challenging, especially with, you know, there is a lot of theory crafting all over the place on what Age 4 is going to be and what's in it and what's not. And
the expectation,
you know, it's this
from
time
that
period
must be like,
no, it is, like, you know, but we've got to, there's a certain amount of, like, oh God, you know, is everyone gonna like this? And then there's a certain amount of, like, we got to do something a little, are people gonna and I can't wait to finally show it and be able to people can start being like, oh, okay, this is, oh, and then they can go crazy with the things that we show or whatever and do all kinds of theory crafting.
XO19?
Well, Aaron gave that really strong wink wink when he was on about if you're an Age fan. I mean, I'm not gonna contradict Aaron on that wink wink from Aaron to me to you wink wink. But no, it's daunting. There's a lot. It's a big game.
How is it different working on Command and Conquer back then and working on Age now? Is it kind of like where you're still focused because you said earlier that there was a lot of before you worked on Red Alert was a lot of minutia kind of crafting the historical accuracy and things like that. How was it going from something like Red Alert where everything was just balls to the wall, let's see what we can make stick,
zany, right?
Yeah. And going from that and transitioning to Age of Empires now, all those years later, is it more similar to the accuracy of the first one, or are you looking to bring some of that experience from Red Alert into Age?
Well, there's always things. It's funny. So, I always go with stories and analogies when you ask questions like this. So, Dustin Browder, who is the lead designer on Red Alert 2, he was also lead designer on Battle for Middle-earth and Generals. He ended up at Blizzard, and he did StarCraft 2. And it's interesting talking to him because there was a lot of things in Command and Conquer that I guess there was some resistance at first to putting him in anything that was even a gun that spins up over time, which is something that was in Red Alert 2. There was some resistance to that in the Blizzard circles of but that was in Command and Conquer. We can't do that. It's it was a good idea and it's kind of a cool thing. And so, when you ask what carries and what doesn't, I think there's a lot of great, there's so many great ideas across a lot of RTS games in terms of mechanics, right? An interesting unit type, no one's really done a spy, right? Like we did in Red Alert, right? Where there was a detect unit and you have a spy and the spy looks like your units. No one's really done that. Are we going to do that in Age? I'm not going to say yes or no. It depends a lot on our time period and all kinds of other things once we start talking about the game. But, there's the mechanic level of it. And there's a lot of things that I think could work in any game. And from Red Alert all the way to, an Age of Empires, there's always fun things like that. For me, it was, the one thing that is the through line is all the Westwood games from Tiberian Sun onward had right-click drag scrolling where you could hold down the right mouse button and it would drop an anchor and you could move away from, and the speed, the distance which you moved from that anchor on the screen, the whole screen would then scroll faster, slower, and you could kind of very elegantly move around the screen without having to move your hands. So you could keep your hand on your keys without having to go down to arrow keys and take your hand off the mouse. And we put that in everything, and I insisted that be in the Age games now. So that's in all the DEs and it's going to be in 4. Actually, right now, 4 is the only game that doesn't have it in it, and so it drives me crazy when I'm switching between the games and playing them all, because I'm okay, I'm going to, I can't scroll. I got to go back. How quaint. I got to use the edges of the screen. Oh, my God. Yeah, but, but it's it's a challenge. I mean, Age is all about history, right? It's about accurate history. The crazy thing is once we start talking about the game and some of the missions and some of the things we're doing and some of the game modes, there's some things that happen in history that you're literally wait, that's real? Because that's a game mode. Literally a modern game mode, and that people are doing is there's a version of that was real in history. So it's super cool to when we get to that point. But I mean, the thing that's different is we have to find different outlets for being crazy and being fun and being interesting, and maybe it's in reviewing something that was in the other Age games that we're well, what about this aspect? And I'm being vague, and I apologize. It's because I absolutely will not give you any tells as to when our time period is or anything like that for Age 4. So I have to be insanely vague, and I apologize, but it's just the way things are going to roll.
That's fine. NDAs, everything.
Yeah, no, it's just I don't want to give anything away. We got a lot going on. But so there's elements of a game we would look at an aspect of the game, and I'll actually use Red Alert as an example. Let's say we're doing a new version of Red Alert, and we're harvesting's kind of dull. It's kind of boring. What could we do with harvesting that would be more interesting with, and Red Alert 2 kind of solved that with the chrono harvesters, and the Soviet ones are armed, right? And they've got the little workers that come out. They are really creative, working within the space. And so that's a great example, like from Red Alert to Red Alert 2, in how they like explored what harvesting could even be, and like interesting ways of doing that. So you could think about things like that we would do in Age, right, where we would apply something to similar situations and be like, okay, is this really as far as we can take this? Is like this as cool as it could be, if it's shared between the games. And then so we'll look for avenues like that so that we can really explore and dive into, and then we have to ask ourselves, like, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is anything wrong with what was there before, or is this actually better? Right? Or is it better? Is it new just for news sake? And that's something that, we have a lot of discussions around, and we have in the past, throughout the development cycle of Age 4 has been like, yeah, this is new, but is it worth being new? Like, does it bring something to the game that people are going to be like, oh my God, this is a totally new way to play or whatever? Or is it just new for news sake?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We get a lot of that. We have closed betas. They're not betas. The game's not a beta. We have closed tests that we run with all the Age games, including 4. Oh my God, some people are actually playing 4 out in the wild. And we get a lot of feedback. We have some very diehard Age fans, which is awesome. And they can be pretty intense about things that they do or do not like, that are like the old game, or exactly. Some people that are very, very in love with one of the other Age games, and so for having something different, they're like, why is this different? And the cool thing is some of the things that we've done, it's been fun to see like almost the 7 stages of grief over the course of like one play period, right? So let's say for a week, and they start and they're like, people are very upset over something that we've changed or is different, right? Like this is fundamentally different from the other Age games, and they'll be like, and then I don't like this, and then be like, well, no, and they get grumpy, and then finally like, well, maybe it's, and then by the end they're like, this is actually better.
Yeah.
And so like, maybe, I don't know. Like there's things we're doing. I think that there's so many things I can't wait to.
That's the definition of how you can allow feature creep, right?
Can't
if you
wait
listen
either,
to everybody, suddenly you start losing like what you lasers set on, but then sometimes it works and you can find a better path and stuff like that. I mean, here's an interesting question. You mentioned mouse and keyboard and keeping your hands on the different devices, and obviously there's this. Now, is Age being approached? I mean, and I presume this is the case. Absolutely PC first, but is there but there's also keyboard and mouse support. Good pad. There's also keyboard and mouse support on the Xbox.
So this just sits in a bag in my desk, and I refuse to use it because I love this controller so much.
It's my favorite controller ever.
That it's just this thing is so awesome. The Sea of Thieves controller. There's so much personality. Sorry.
That's right. No, it's good. It's a little marketing plug, like Sea of Thieves.
Killer GDC one that I got at
GDC.
Wow.
Ooh,
this one's
nice.
Awesome.
That's
How
awesome.
cool is that?
Right, it's got like orange gold triggers and a plus
And that's
cross
the
pad.
GDC one you said?
I like that one.
Yeah, this one is from X-Fest, actually. It's from X-Fest.
Oh,
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, this was one that some my friends in the controller division hooked me up, and I was like, thank you so much.
I really want them to bring the design lab to the Elite Series 2 because I want my name on it and I want it to.
Oh man.
Hold on a second.
I don't know if they're going to do that or not.
I just want Design Lab in Australia first. We still don't have it.
Noted. I didn't know that. Really, it's not regional, huh?
No, not
idea.
yet. My daughter's hanging to make one, but she can't yet.
Adam's on it, mate. As soon as this podcast finished, he's like,
I will send mail to Chris Novak and tell him that he needs to get on that.
Oh man, I want to make one so bad.
The thing is like I love my Elite pad so much, and it's like at the same time, like I don't know why I have like these weirdly abrasive hands. Like friends have commented over the years, like when I get a pad, I'm like, it's new and it feels so crisp and it feels rough, and then after like 2 weeks, it's like, it's really smooth and I need a new one now. But the Elite one, I really like.
This one, I've got this one that this came with I think the S, and it's got the bump ridge, and it hasn't worn out. Like this is the controller I have up here on my PC, and then I've got Elites downstairs in my gaming area, and this one's been great because this hasn't worn down that much, and I use this a ton for any kind of PC gaming.
There's one controller Microsoft made, and in my experience, it's literally the only one that has never suffered any of the wear from the oils in your hands or anything like that. And it was the limited edition silver Xbox 360 controller. I still use it to this day.
The silver one with the rotating pad.
Yeah,
the plus pad that you can rotate between.
Oh my, I had that one.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great controller.
I still have that controller, and to this day, there's no shininess or anything on the sides. It's still the same as it was the day I got it. And Microsoft needs to stick to that material for the controllers because it's unreal. It's so
I don't
good.
know. Have you any of you gotten here to touch one of the Elite 2 controllers?
No, sadly, I didn't.
No.
Wanted to go to
okay.
Gamescom.
Yeah, like
but...
you touch it and you kind of close your eyes and you move the sticks, especially with the tensioners now that you can do to like you can set them back to feel like a 360. You just hold it and close your eyes and you're like, oh, this is so good. Like it's really like it's a kind of amazing how much they've enhanced the original Elite. I am super looking forward to. I haven't pre-ordered one because I'm a cheap bastard and I'm waiting for them to come to our company store, so I'll get like a little bit of a discount because I'll be like, I need two, and then of course
the only thing I'm waiting for is confirmation of battery life because I know it has a built-in rechargeable pack.
Oh, that's devastating.
I just hope it has like a decent battery life because I know that the let me see, the Pro controller for the Switch here.
Yes, 60-hour
like,
battery.
What, 40 to 60 hours, yeah.
Yep. It's amazing.
And honestly, like, if it has that battery in the Elite V2,
So
regular batteries.
Yeah, I'm
40
still,
to 60 is just lasts me forever.
I'm still gutted it's got an internal.
My whole house is like run on Eneloop batteries.
Yeah.
Like,
Same here.
Look, here's a case of Eneloop batteries just sitting right here. Like, it's so I use them all over the house, all my controllers, everything. But from what I understand, and this is just from talking to some of the guys that were working when I was at E3 and I was playing around with the controller, and they were, their target, from what I understand, their target was to go after something like that, the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which is a great controller, right?
That's good.
Feels solid, has an amazing battery, so. If that's the case and it does land there, I think that's all. Like everything else about that controller is incredible.
I don't know if you know though, Adam, but do you know why they made the switch from external to internal battery?
I don't know. I mean, I know that Microsoft, we do a ton of data. You look at a ton of data and do a ton of research. And I don't know. I don't know if it was a cost of goods issue or if it was something else that they wanted to do or if it was literally all of their data says that this would sell better. I have no idea. I don't know.
I got to admit, I was devastated when they made the switch. I love that all my Xbox controllers use external. Like, as someone that's always generally collected consoles, sometimes opens them up years later and plays them again, it's great to know that I could just pop the batteries out of this thing and pop some fresh ones in and keep using my 360 controller just for as long as I want to.
Much like these, I imagine that, worst case, something down the road would be you just plug it in and it's wired, right? You plug a wire into it in the back and then you can still use it even if the battery is... No, I get what you're saying, though. I totally get it. I don't know.
For example, right, with the DualShock 3 now, they are a very rare and expensive item to try and buy, like even on eBay. Like they have a shelf life now. So if I want to, I've kept my PS3. I still have my PS3, and the day's gonna come when that controller completely and utterly dies, and my PS3 effectively becomes worthless.
It's a tricky decision to make. But battery technology's got to come a long way. The most depressing thing for me with my Elite pad, there it is, and it's all the glory. And Ed knows this because I really goofed up, right? So the rubber started peeling here. So I was like, and he was like, hey man, don't worry about it. You can get these things off Amazon. They're a tenner, and you can go get them replaced. And idiot here was like, oh, it's got to be for the entire rubber grip. So before they arrived, I peeled off the rubber, thinking that it was going to replace the whole unit. That's not how it worked. But in a way, it's just to make an excuse to buy the Elite 2. So, yeah. But I know that we actually didn't answer the question there. Is there plans?
I totally deflected.
You totally did.
I totally dodged that. You see how good that was? No. It's totally fine. You can ask me the question. Go ahead.
Just, there are console people out there that want Microsoft to release every game that they're making on both devices, but my argument would be that there are some games that are not suited to the devices. Is it going to be the case, or is the discussion still ongoing? If Age of Empires does come to console, will it simply have on the box requires mouse and keyboard? Or is someone very clever going, how am I going to fit all of that under this?
All of that into that, yeah. So this is what I've told press and everything that have asked me this at Gamescom and other things, is like right now, RTS is really, unless you build specifically for a console, like something like
Halo Wars.
Halo Wars, yeah, that's a great example, right? They built it around the idea of driving and around a controller. Like, controllers are so direct drive, right? Like, this is about controlling a thing, right? Like, I'm driving something, I'm doing things with it. The keyboard and mouse is very point and click, like God control. So RTS really was born on mouse, right? Like, that was the whole point of RTS. Or when it started. And so what we want to do with Age is we just want to make the best possible PC RTS games we can make right now. But that's just for now. Like, I know, we all know that there are tons of people out there that have Xboxes. They would love to play them. A lot of people have nostalgia for playing, everything from Command and Conquer to StarCraft to whatever, other RTS games they played on console and really loved them back in the day. I think they'd honestly have a little hard time going back and playing them now and be like, ooh, that was pretty rough. But, like, I've built multiple console interfaces before for RTS games, and it's a challenge. Like, you really do have to build a completely different interface. Yeah. So once we get the games out, and they're out there in the wild, and the PC games out there, and we're like, okay, I can breathe. Then we'll start looking at what we can do, and whether that'll be keyboard and mouse. Like, keyboard and mouse would be pretty easy to just turn on and like put it on the Xbox, but that's gonna get a percentage, like a small percentage of your audience. I have a room, like I'm sitting here and I've got a PC, right? But this is not where my gaming is. If I'm doing like gaming, like console gaming, that's somewhere else. And so, like, I don't have a keyboard and mouse down there. So I would even be like, oh, I've either got to get the Razer peripheral or, I've got to find some other solution. So, and I don't want to leave, the pad player. I don't want to make pad players feel bad because they don't have a mouse and keyboard. And, again, Age is one of those, like, we want everybody to play. It's like, it's kind of for all, it's a low teen rated game. We can't be E for everyone anymore, which is amazing because the first Age was E for everyone, believe it or not. But then they're like, wait, these games are all about, like, fighting, and okay, well, maybe teen. So we want as many people to play the game as possible, and so not having pad, obviously it's something that we want to make happen, but I can't say we're doing it.
It's a tricky
like we're not,
and that's the reason.
And
it's, I guess
it's a completely different. We have to make a completely different interface, basically, and then you get into conversations of like, well, do we shard the audience? Like the people that are playing on pad and the people that are playing on keyboard and mouse, you kind of don't want them playing each other because the keyboard and mouse guys are going to have a lot more fidelity, maybe. But maybe you could do something that, like, if a PC player plugs in a controller, it can be like, hey, do you want to switch to control?
Yeah.
Controller, and do you want to play with the controller people instead of keyboard or mouse? Like, you'd have to make that decision. I don't know.
It's a tricky one.
Those are all questions. Yeah, we're going to have to answer down the road. I mean, I want to make it happen, but we can't. I can't promise anything right now. Like right now, we got to get PC to be awesome, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. It's
the right approach, to be honest with you. I mean, the only thing I was thinking is like you could force or bundle this, and then somehow use this.
No. Like, do you remember? Like, Microsoft actually made a Strategy Commander peripheral at one point. It's like this crazy mouse. Like, I think it's in a box down in storage. Someone, when we were at Westwood, someone sent me a prototype, like, design, like a mold for a RTS controller, and it was like this massive palm trackball with like 100 buttons around it, right? It looks like an Aztec mask. It looks like a Cyclops Aztec mask. I have to get it and put it up. Actually, never mind. I gotta find that now. And it's just nuts. And you're like, how could you even use this? Like, what would you'd have to like have like your hands like this or something? like I'm a mutant. Like I use a trackball mouse. Like I'm one of the few people that actually. This is because I destroyed my shoulder playing Doom when I was younger. Like I played way too much Doom, to the point where like the cartilage in my shoulder is gone, and so it like pops and cracks like crazy. Yeah, it's super nasty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so like I have to use a trackball, otherwise like my shoulder screams in pain. Like if I do like kind of repetitive stress motion with it. Yeah, that's fun. That's what video games can do when you play Doom a lot.
Wow.
A lot of Doom back in the day. Anyway, but yeah, so we'll look, once we're done with the PC, we'll look into it.
Fair enough.
See where we
Fair
can
enough.
go.
So
it's about as much as we can ask.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean,
so Gears 5 came out this week. Well, it came out early access this week, and I think the standard version launches on the 10th. Super pleased for the coalition, because I was thinking about this earlier this evening, or yesterday. God, time zones. In that they were formed, they were working on something, then they got the Gears IP. They did Gears Ultimate in like a year. To wet their whistle, so to speak. They then said, right, let's make a Gears game. They made Gears 4 in something like 2 years. Then they, within 2.5 years, have made Gears 5. And what has struck me so far is that it is this... The best way I can describe it is, and I've only played the first act, so it feels to me like that jump from Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2 in terms of vision and polish and ideas. Right. How the hell are they pulling this off in 2.5 years, comparatively?
They're being incredibly smart. I mean, they built a game, right? They built Gears 4, and then they went, okay, we have an engine running, we have our basic combat model running, we have all this stuff. Okay, Gears 5, better graphics, better 60 frames, all these things that they wanted to do. I'm spitballing here, by the way. I'm theory crafting because I don't, I talk to some people at Coalition every so often, but I am not involved in all at Gears. Full disclaimer, like I'm in my own little zone that I do, publishing and now Age of Empires. But I mean, like, anytime that you build a game, one of the most frustrating things for me, you were asking me earlier, what's one of the most frustrating things in design? Throwing away an engine can be really frustrating. That's actually something that can be massively frustrating, is that you spend all this time and energy building an engine to build a game, right? If it's not something, even if it's something like Unreal, you've highly customized it to do what you want it to do for the game that you're making, and you always want to get more of a return out of it, right? So it's like you finish the game and then you're like, oh, we'll do a sequel, and look at something like Age 1 to Age 2. It's kind of the same thing, where they're like, oh, we learned everything about what we should do better or not do, and then they and they made everything better. And I think that you're seeing the natural, and even Rod said that, I believe, during Gears 4, is he's like, we needed to make a Gears game to prove we could make a Gears game. Now we're going to make a new Gears game, right? And that's what 5 is. And I think that they were smart. They looked at what they had, they figured out what they wanted to improve on. They knew what they were going to live with, based on what they'd done before, and they just chose their battles really well. And it's a super smart team, and they're very driven and dedicated, and they knew exactly what they were going to do, and they went and did it. And when you're focused like that, and you know what you want to build, and you have a great vision, I mean, and Rod is an incredibly good director, and he keeps everything focused and moving forwards, and they're just bam, 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 and they're able to do that and make the game they want to make.
And if you'd have asked me before Gears 5 had come out, and bear in mind I've only played the first act, so who knows, at the end I might be like, no, I didn't like it, but I don't think that's going to happen. I would have said, if you'd have asked me before and someone said to me, do you think there should be another Gears after Gears 5? I would have said, no, I'd love to see the Coalition do something else, like maybe Perfect Dark as a third-person action adventure. But
yeah, sure.
But
gotta ask Rare about that. That's Rare's game, right? That's their IP.
It is. They'd have to give permission. But I can't help but think now I really want to see all these little open world elements and all these kind of neat kind of blossoming ideas. I want to see what happens, because obviously now the roster is, in terms of Xbox Game Studios, they've got they've got a little bit more breathing room, right, in terms of your calendar year and your release dates and things. And I believe that is the mantra now, is like, let studios do what they want to do and take the time that they need to take. And then I sit there thinking, God, if they've done this in 2.5 years, what if they had 3.5 or 4, to really go nuts?
Well, to be honest, like, there's a point where game development can go too long.
Star Citizen.
Yeah, and it well, Star Citizen. That's I don't go into that. That's a super. They're just doing their own thing, and they've got a very different philosophy. But like, you remember when EverQuest came out, or maybe you don't. Maybe I'm dating myself here, but EQ comes out, right? I know, like, Nick is almost as old as I think we're all pretty much in the ballpark. I'm probably older than all of you, but not by much.
Not Cairo.
But Cairo's a young whippersnapper.
23.
Oh man,
he's the baby.
Like double that, and I'm still older than that. But everyone was rushing to make MMOs. But of course, making an MMO takes like 4 years to develop the tech and get everything running and blah. And then of course everyone ran out of money because they released bad MMOs, or they didn't release at all. Like, it's sometimes a game can go too long, right? So there's a certain amount of time where it's like, okay, get the game done, and it's like, if you have time to polish and make it amazing, that's awesome. And sometimes that can be a challenge because of everything else that's going on. Like, you run out of, that's the first thing that gets eaten away sometimes in terms of time when you look at an entire project, is like the polishing time, and it's like, it might shrink some based on everything else not getting done in time. But when you have enough to do that, then you can make a great product and release it when you want. But you're like, what if they had 4 years? And I would immediately say they probably don't want 4 years.
It's a long time,
right? Like, most developers I know, you kind of creatively. It's fine to make a sequel to a game. That's very different than a game going for 4+ years. Like, a game taking 4 years to make. That's a long time. And like, people, especially if things aren't being fresh or changing, like if there's things that are wrong, right? Like, it's churn. It's not necessarily creative output and like creating things. It's more like just solving frustration.
I can imagine.
Then that can, you don't want projects to go that long.
So
generally.
On that, I've got 2 things actually. So on that, it's interesting you mentioned that, how 4 or 5 years. So Halo Infinite by next year will be 5 years, but I'm guessing that a lot of that is the Slip Space engine, as opposed to development.
I would imagine. I mean, like, I don't know.
Because Bungie's engine is like 17 years old.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons. I would assume, just for me, like, that if they were doing major updates to the engine, that takes a long time. It's one of the reasons, like, people are like, oh, you've been working on Age 4 for a long time. And we're like, yeah, because we had to build a new engine, right? Like, we had to make a new RTS engine in order and make a modern one, right? And there's a lot that goes into that before you can even start building the actual game. And so, that can take a lot of time.
It's interesting because I remember reading, I can't remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of, they were talking about why they showed what they showed when they did the first demo versus why they showed what they showed when they did the demo or the intro at E3 this year. And it was, they mentioned their pipeline, and they said, a lot of people had to work on this specific element to get it ready for that thing. And I think what that said to me as a layman was that they have a set sort of series of milestones, and if you pull people off to do some arbitrary marketing thing, because ostensibly that's what it is, and you're taking them time out from working on the product as a whole, you can affect that timeline. So to me, it kind of said they showed what they could because their pipeline allowed it, and they didn't show what they couldn't show because they're not ready yet because of the way they've structured the project in terms of how it's being built. I mean, that's my layman's perspective looking at it. And it speaks volumes to me that they are acutely aware at 343 at the almost ridiculous demand from them as a studio. I mean, I personally speaking, I feel bad for them in some ways, because it's like, it is one of those games that everyone has their thing that they love about that product that is most important to them, but they can't cater for every single person that has all these needs. Like, I love Forge, over everything else. Someone might be purely multiplayer focused, someone is just about campaign and lore, and they've somehow got to tick every single box to a degree to make that overall price. I mean, man, what a no thanks. I don't want that pressure.
They're on a hiding to nothing regardless.
No pressure or anything, right?
Oh, dear.
I have a lot of confidence in the Halo team. They do great work. There are a lot of really, really good people over there doing super cool stuff from what I understand. Like, I haven't even seen it. I haven't seen anything outside of the trailers that everybody else has seen. And I'm very much looking forward to being delighted by what they're going to, whenever that game releases. I have no idea. There's been no release announced or anything, I don't think.
Just
so, yeah, I mean, it'll be super fun.
I think. So, you could pigeonhole the end of next year.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Who knows? So,
yeah, don't know. But yeah, no, it's super exciting. I mean, like, it's funny you mentioned, like, your favorite thing. For me, it's like Arbiter. I just want Arbiter. Yeah. Like, if we can play co-op again, my wife and I, we've played all the Halos that we could co-op, split screen, and it was funny always playing. Was it 2 when you could play Arbiter and Chief, right? And it's funny, we were sitting there playing, and like, I feel bad because like this is obviously one of those things that's hard to solve when you're like it's a solo player game, but now you can play split screen co-op and someone's playing that second character. But my wife is playing Arbiter and I'm playing Chief. And she's just sitting there, and like in every cutscene, they're like, "Chief, thank God you're here." Like Arbiter, who's even bigger, right, is like sitting right there, and my wife is just sitting there. She's just sitting there going like, "Big lizard,
right here, just ready to help."
No one's paying attention to me. Just right here, like big lizard. You could just turn to me and say hello or something, and it was great. Like I love the games to death, and
yeah.
There's so much amazing lore and everything in the Halo universe, and there's so much to it. Yep. I can't wait to see what they're gonna do. With,
it's gonna be
infinite
exciting. I am looking forward to it.
I know. With so many cool things.
John, you mentioned before with Coalition and how they took over and they made everything really fast. Now, Adam, you probably don't know the answer to this, and I reckon that even if you did, you wouldn't give us the answer.
Sure, okay.
But I really hope that whatever Black Tusk / Coalition were working on prior to taking over Gears, I kind of hope that's not gone. Because that teaser they gave us
the spy Shanghai, wasn't it? Shanghai
was
the name, yeah.
Shanghaist.
Or was that the official name? Shanghai?
I have no idea.
I think it's the online moniker given to it. That's kind of why I subtly mentioned, I saw Perfect Dark vibes in that kind of like spy thriller style thing.
Sure. Oh yeah, it's like high-tech spy, right?
Almost like
totally
a Splinter Cell-y type of thing.
Do you know one thing I missed that's really gone is Perfect Dark and GoldenEye tiered objectives to difficulty.
Yeah.
And the other mode where you could assume an NPC and try and stop your friend during campaign levels. Like, why does no one do those things anymore? Like, they were really cool ideas. Yeah.
I guess kind of Dark Souls, right? Because you can invade other
true.
people. That's the closest thing I could think to like hindering somebody that's playing your game. Well, probably because also there are people that get, the minute you add extra stress onto their play, they're already stressed enough that they're playing, and then suddenly something's trying to murder them and screw up their game or like send them back to a checkpoint. They're probably going to get even more stressed is generally what can happen.
Secretly why I love.
So then you get all this pressure on people, right? And then they kind of melt down and they don't want to play your game.
Secretly why I love Sea of Thieves. It's just a big trolling, griefing simulator.
Or people are really nice.
It's amazing.
Like I see these wonderful videos of kids that drive up and they're like, hello, and then here's some treasure, and see you later, bye, and then they just take off, and you're like, wait, is that a trap? Were they putting dynamite, like
it was always
powder keg in my? No, they were.
Whenever
just
our crews
super
played,
nice.
It was like you'd encounter another crew, and they might be like, dude, good guys, we're friendly, like chill, we're gonna look after you, don't worry. And then in our private chat, we'd be like, right, so what point do we murder them? And then you had this conversation, but
so
as the
what do they do?
Went on, it was like, oh, they're being really helpful. Like maybe we shouldn't. And then the fight would finish, and everyone would kind of stand opposite each other. And then I would usually be the one to be like,
it's like
hands in the air, we were going to murder you. And they'd be like, oh, we were going to do that too, but we've decided internally that we're okay. We had a bit, and we're like, we did the same. Here's your half, here's half.
It's like if ships could back up, you finish the fight and both ships just kind of like slow move away from each other until, until they're out of range, and then they can kind of do their thing. Yeah, no, it's great, and I love the emergent behaviors of people and like how people have either risen or fallen is so wonderful in Sea of Thieves, right? It's just such a great dynamic to see play out with the mechanics that they've added, and the stuff that they keep announcing that they're adding to the game. I think just adds
see the developer
layers and layers onto that.
Accidentally announcing fire on a live stream? Because
I heard about this. I didn't actually watch the stream, but like he mentioned, like someone mentioned fire or something like that. That things are going to burn.
He'd been on the stream before, and he got a 6-month internal "you're not streaming for Rare anymore" ban, like because he leaked pets. He leaked that pets were coming. It was his first stream back, and he just went. Anyway, so one of the cool things that we've announced is fire, and you saw the guy next to him be like, "Have we announced that?" And then you'd hear Joe Neat off the screen going, "Hey Joe," and there'd be silence. And you just saw the developer go. It's just pure gold. It was so funny. I felt so sorry for him.
It's so hard. Sometimes it's just so hard because there's so many moving parts to games, and even if you know what you are and you're not supposed to talk about, sometimes these things just slip out. It's accidental. Yeah, and it's. And the funny thing is there's times where people, like someone you're talking to is trying to dig and is intentionally trying to set you up so that you'll accidentally say something. But sometimes you're in the moment of like just having a good time chatting with people about games because you all love games, like something about like Sea of Thieves, and you might just go blah, right? Which is obviously what happened. And he's like, "Oh, we haven't announced that. Oh God, I'm dead." Right? Like and that's poor guy. I mean, like I feel for him because I've done. I remember in the Westwood days, there was someone was like, well, a press asked me a question, and they were like, hey, when you do Tiberian Twilight, what about this? And I'm like, well, we'd probably do this. And I didn't quote it at first with saying, well, if we do Tiberian Twilight, this is what we would do. And so by omission, they used it as acknowledgement that the game was in development. Yeah. So then there was this massive like, this game is in development, blah, and I'm like, oh God, kill me. like sometimes things can get really, spun to be, whatever people want them to be, regardless of the good intent or, trying to be a good person, that you're like, oh, let me answer your question instead of just ignoring you, right? And it's like,
a bit sneaky. And that's one thing that annoys me in modern sort of websites and things. There's a lot of clickbaity titles where, you read it and you're like, he didn't actually say that. You're inferring from what he didn't say, and which feels really disingenuous to me, but...
Yeah, it's disappointing.
This brings up a fairly, decent question, I guess. So you look at the other media industries like television, movies, books. Sometimes, authors will tell you shit in advance. Music, where there's a lot of transparency with the process, the creation process, and budgets and who's on what, not plot or anything like that, but definitely who's involved with the project, how long the project's going to take to release, stuff like that. How come there's so, in contrast to that, gaming is just so secretive? It's very much like we have, and the reason why I keep cutting off is because Siri keeps asking me questions. So anyway,
like that.
There she goes again. Anyway, so you look at all these other industries and you see there's a lot more transparency than there is in games, and I'm wondering why is it that games, like game developers and publishers, tend to try and remain more secretive than their other medium counterparts?
I don't know if that's... Well, I would challenge that. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, if you could tell me, how much did Jay-Z's last album cost to make? Right?
No,
is that public?
Yeah.
Right? How much did... Hollywood tends to... if you go read about Hollywood, there's a lot of interesting things that you can draw parallels with. When they say it costs this much to make a movie, they're saying that because of other things that are going on with how the deals are structured with all the people that are involved and such, that these people are going to make money. These people might not make any money ever because this is not net, it's gross. There's all these things that kind of get finangled in the background. So like I don't know if honestly we really know how much a lot of things cost to make, unless you get like an independent studio that comes out and is like, here's actually like how much it costs for me to pay my mortgage, and this is how much time I put into the project, and then we can calculate that this is how much it was worth, and you know what have you. So I don't know if the games industry is any more secret. I mean, like Hollywood just tends to be kind of leaky in terms of its, and there's also because of
that's true.
The star power involved. I think that there's a lot of pre-purchase. It's almost like, you know, how advertising is sold to television networks, right? They show all the pilots and everything, and then the advertisers are like, oh, we're going to invest in that, and I'll spend this much money and for this many seasons, this long of a thing, because we know the show is going to run for this many weeks, and so we'll have a buy-in, whatever. You know, and like Hollywood kind of operates like that too, right? It's like, oh my God, Tom Cruise is attached to this project, and then everyone's like, oh my God, Tom Cruise is attached to the project, right? And then they all run out, and it's easier for the producers to get more money or to get finance, you know, whatever, because there's the star power and there's draw, and they know that certain box office they'll do all this stuff, right? So, like, I can see why publicly there would be more information available in those kind of things. Like, let me ask you an honest question. Like, what would that do? Like, if you knew exactly how much it costs for a game to be made, like, how would that change anything? Like, what perspective would that add? That would be, I mean, because I'm just curious, like, what perspective would it add that you would think would be like enriching to the industry? Like, how would it change the industry in a way you think just, I mean, there's salary and everything, like for people, that's different.
Honestly, like me personally, I don't really think it changed anything. Like, just in general, because who cares if this information is made public or not?
Right.
I just think it's more of an interesting note to say, this information is made public a lot more often in other mediums, either by intention or just by circumstance.
Sure.
Whereas in games, everything is the message is more controlled.
I think that's a lot marketing.
So marketing.
Well, no, like, but with the product release, right? So, I mean, I don't know because I don't work in that industry, but, you know, I work for a software company, and we have a roadmap and a pipeline, and I think there is a fine line, and I think it's warped a little bit because of indie developers and for Kickstarters, and where that process is super transparent and you can see milestones being hit and it's shared to say, hey, look, we're making this thing that you paid for in advance. We have to be transparent because you're kind of like our shareholders. Whereas for bigger releases, I think that there's a fine line that's walked for publishers where it's like, we have a product we're making. We have to wait until it gets to a certain point before we say, right, it's viable and we're good to go. We have X amount set aside for a budget for marketing. We have X amount set aside for when we're going to show it here at this event and so on. And if it all leaks, and we've seen that, right? There are the Kotakus in the world and Jason Schreier who will just be like, Ubisoft are making this and it's set here. And boom, for the developers working on that project, they may be like, man, why have you just blown what we wanted to surprise and delight people with? So there's that side, but then there is what you're saying, Cairo, in that, you know, why not come out and say, yeah, we're moving on to Gears 6 now, for example, if the Coalition said next week, right, we're going to carry on supporting Gears 5, but yes, of course we're developing Gears 6. That's never going to happen. It will be saved up to make a splash because it's about selling a product. That's how I look at that industry.
But you know what it is as well, though?
It's not like...
I think the question is coming from a place of innocence and a place of good intentions, but the problem is, so the reason a lot of us are like, why can't you just tell us what's being worked on now? Because it's a positive thing. Like, we want to know about it, we want to get excited, but the issue is that if you announce something or something is shown that's very, very early, it's the negative that's sort of out there, and the negative is what's a lot louder than the positive.
Polish.
So it's like, hold on, you're working on a sequel to this game. Why does it need another sequel for? And you've already made so many of them.
And then you get the people that are like, I didn't want you to make that. I wanted you to make this.
And look at the backlash for Fable Legends, Scalebound, Phantom Dust. Right? We're making these products. We announced them too early and they didn't work out. Now everyone is going to rag on us for those projects failing. And I think that's the that's the key, and that's why things are kept secret, because you can furtively work away. Right, are we at the point that this is definitely going to go and the project's viable? Great. Then you start that marketing message. I think that's the difference. Like, for all we know, Killer Instinct 2 could be there right now, but we just don't know if it exists or not until someone says
don't know.
It exists. So
you just don't know.
Yeah. it's a question. It's a question coming out of genuine curiosity, because I'm sure Nick has seen, at least in the game design channel in the Discord chat, often I'd be talking about just making something huge and then just not telling anyone about it, and then just releasing it on Steam one day, and then whoever happens to come along to play this game comes along and tells other people.
Apex Legends.
Well, I mean, like
the whole
like,
word of mouth thing, like the Tesla thing. But at the same time, it, because there's a certain stupid.
So
segment Siri the fifth.
So
guest.
let me. I'm just gonna play devil's advocate here for a second. So and I'm just totally doing this. Disclaimer, this is just me talking like a fanboy, basically, and playing both sides of the coin. Okay, full disclaimer, because I'm not saying anything. This is not endorsement of a company. It's not a negative of a company. Blah. Right? Like, yeah, exactly. So I'm doing all this so that everyone can just edit it down to what they want. Anyway, but so like, would Apex Legends have been better had they Respawn announced that they were working on it? Would it have... If you'd known that Respawn was working on a battle royale game, right? That was now maybe there would have been hype because it would have been like, oh, it's in the Titanfall universe, and everyone's like, oh my god, like what would that be? Because that would be exciting to me. But then you could also see people being like, oh, EA's just trying to cash in on battle royale, and they're just doing this thing because they make money and blah blah blah. They don't care about the players, blah blah blah, right? Which is and Respawn is completely not that. Like, if everything they've released is like, we love players, we love pushing the limits of things. Their ping system is like, why isn't that in every EA game now? It should be, right? Like,
Fortnite
those brilliant.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, and what a surprise! Like, it is a good idea though. Like, I kind of want it in all the games that we have that could make it work, right? Like, it's just such an amazingly great thing for the industry as a whole, and its accessibility and all these other things. Anyway, but that's kind of aside. Like, Apex was awesome. It was this delightful, like, guess what? This is what we've been working on. Holy crap, it's cool. Like, oh my god, it plays well. Like, it's got cool characters. Like, the team element is awesome, right? And they're also in a highly competitive genre where you've got other companies that are very agile, right? And can get their version of that thing up pretty quickly. So, there's pros and cons, right? Like, but I think that there would have been a lot less positive sentiment had they talked about that early, rather than just, hey, by the way, we've been working on this thing here, play it today, it's free, have fun, and everyone's like, oh my god, this plays great.
The Shadow Drop was
right, like,
was brilliant, because everyone.
I thought it was perfect, great the way they did it.
And when I hear a company's working on Battle Royale, I'm like, another one,
Right, so you roll your eyes and you're like, oh, another battle royale. Like, how many of these are we going to have? But like, that does shut down a lot of the, like, there's so many ways to innovate in every genre. It's just a matter of looking at it, right? And I think that's what Apex really tried to do, is like, how do we make this better? How do we make this genre better, right? And I think they did what they did. They did really, really well. I'm a big fan of Respawn, by the way. Like, I absolutely adore the Titanfall games.
Campaign is like. It is up there.
In 2? Oh my god.
It is.
This actually does pivot pretty well into another thing that I just got reminded of by this conversation. Was I don't think we've ever really seen a game company have a Blair Witch marketing moment. Where the first movie comes out, no one knows what the hell it is.
They're like, what is this?
The production studio lies about every single facet of that movie to make it seem real, to make it seem like this actually happened, right? And you have the long tail afterwards of people being like, was this actually real? Did this really happen? And they actually research and do reporting. And I don't think we've had ARGs in gaming.
I love bees
for marketing campaigns. Halo 2 with I Love Bees.
That was great.
And other stuff like that. But we've never had a Blair Witch moment in a game.
I don't know how it would be possible.
Where a game just drops out of nowhere, fakes itself to its story being like, or story or setup or whatever being like, this is potentially real. Like, what if a game dropped itself that pretended that, like, you thought was, it's kind of hard to, I think a good example would actually be, there was this game a while back where the setup was you're a player in an arcade cabinet, and the arcade cabinet is possessed by the devil. I don't remember if you guys remember that game, but
nope.
It steadily transformed over the course of the game and started corrupting things. Like even showing up, like how some games are showing up, where you have to actually go into your system files for the game and mess around with things in order to progress in the game itself. Wow. Doki Doki Literature Club did that, where there were save files for each of the characters, and you actually had to delete a couple of the character files in order to progress in the game.
And it killed the characters.
Yeah,
they were gone from the game.
Yeah, so
the meta, that'd be fascinating. I mean, like a lot of Well, I don't know. I mean, like there's definitely been some games that have come out on console that have had things like that. Well, like this ending, you choose this. Like I'm not going to name the game, but there is one where you choose a certain ending and it deletes your save because it's part of the choice.
I can't remember the game, but I did hear about that.
I know the game, and I'm not gonna say the game because I don't want to give any spoilers away. But like there's some interesting choices that based on the game design, right? That like you can make a choice and it literally erases you because that's part of the choice, right? And so it's like it deletes your save, and you're like, oh crap, it actually did what it said it was gonna do. There's some games that really play around, like oh god, what was the game on PC, the Flash game, Frog Factions? Right? Like, have you heard about this? I think that's the name of it. Now I'm curious. But yeah, there's a game that like, it's this kind of very, I think it's Frog Factions.
He's gonna look it up now.
No, it's like, I'm looking it up right now. Like, it's called Frog Fractions, and it's like, the first one is this really bizarre game that like, and then the second one is like in another game. It's like a spoof of edutainment, but yet I can't even describe it. Like you really should just kind of play it like to see what it's like. But Frog Fractions, and then Frog Fractions 2 was buried inside another game and you accidentally stumbled upon it, and then the game started changing because you're like, wait, what the hell is going on? Like who knows? Like I mean, like maybe, I don't know what, upcoming games, I don't think there's anything. I mean, maybe Death Stranding is going to have something super crazy meta in it. Who knows, right? Like it's Kojima, so you never know where he's going to go, like based on what we've seen. You're like, I don't I know. I love that. And he's like, I don't even know where this is going. Like it's kind of crazy. It's like off the rails, right? That might be super exciting and fun to see, but who knows, like I think that it could happen, but I generally think that the engineering around something like that people would follow it, right? I mean, that would be the challenge, right? Is to get everybody sucked in so that people would play, and then what kind of stuff do you do to make it accessible? I mean, it would be like, how do you capture all the conspiracy talk around like Lost when that came out as a show, right? Like all the people like, it means this, and the island means this, and this is what the stations mean, and the numbers and everything, and I love it, like everyone was talking about it. Every week was like new information. It was all this meta puzzle, right? And it was so fun because everyone could kind of get in on it. Like, so I don't know what the game equivalent of that would be.
Well, I was going to say, it's good that you mentioned Lost, because I reckon a game equivalent to that would be PT on PS4.
Yeah, okay.
PT could be a good example.
PT, I thought was really, I mean, I think, fingers crossed, because I haven't plugged in my external to test that it's not going to disappear on me, but I've still got my copy of PT, and I think that was a game where the communities were jumping online and showing that one person found this in the game, and then another person found something else, and everyone's experience was very, very different with PT depending on how you played it and what you figured out. I thought it was interesting you mentioned Lost, because I reckon PT was probably the game analog to that.
Yeah. Outside of like, you'd say like outside of like raids or something like that in like a Destiny or a WoW or things like that, where people are collaborating and trying to, figure out the solutions and what they can do better and how to optimize and then going and doing it, right? yeah, like working together on some meta puzzle and everyone's kind of contributing in their own way. Yeah, it's a fascinating area to think about, right? It's just a matter of figuring out what those hooks are that you can get. Oh, if you need a wide audience in order to, recoup your costs or whatever it is for your game, like what are you trying to do? Like if it's something small that you can get people into, yeah, it's an interesting space to play in. I can't think of, like you said, PT is probably the only example of that I could think of.
Yeah, it's a shame what happened.
Well, I only thought of it because you mentioned
that.
Lost, and it sort of reminded me that PT was very quirky and how it worked and that sort of stuff, and yeah, it was good.
So we have a section on our site which is called Ed's Top 5, and he comes up with a top 5 every week or so where we pick different things, and I think he's got one that you're probably going to enjoy. Adam and I have sort of out.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go through them. So what's the subject for top 5 this week?
Yep. So I thought because we had Adam on, I wanted to do something that I know that I would love to hear Adam's own opinion on it, and that's my top 5 favorite consoles of all time. So I know there was a lot of people taking guesses in the Discord, and some of them knew straight away. But I don't know how much longer we've got Adam for, so I guess I may as well get straight into it because I think we've been going.
It's fine.
I think we've almost
2
hit
hours.
the 2 hour
We've just
mark
ticked over 2 hours
already.
I think you're I think you're actually at 2 hours, but that's
the
it's
Xbox
okay.
One was my number 5, and I know that's a very recent console, but as someone that tends to just buy every console regardless of what it does, I've found that over the years I valued other things above just the games on a console, as weird as that may sound. So for me, I loved a lot of the things the Xbox One does. Like, I know that when it first came out, the mantra was all-in-one. Like, it was the console that was going to be the only box you needed. And just for me specifically, I actually love that part of it. As a result, I ended up buying 2 more of them that are used exclusively as media players. Now, the fact that the Xbox One also happened to give me 2 or 3 of my favorite games ever just was a bonus. So Titanfall to this day is
the first one.
The first one made its way into my top 10 of all time. I absolutely adore Titanfall.
I have a just to interject, I have a Pavlovian response to hearing "Stand by for Titanfall," like, and that, and I'm like,
that game was damn near perfect for me. It was just the greatest multiplayer shooter I've ever played. Killer Instinct instantly made its way into one of my top 3 probably favorite fighters ever. Just absolutely adore Killer Instinct. I put hundreds of hours into it. It's so good. And Rocket League. I know that's multi-platform or whatever, but again, Rocket League is just another game that I've put probably 700 hours into. I just love it so much. So between the media stuff, like Snap, I miss Snap so much. I know why they got rid of it.
You're a big Snap fan.
But I used it and I loved it. It was so good. I had this photo once that I took where I was watching a football game on one side and then I was watching another football game on the other side, and I just I love the HDMI in. I fully use the HDMI in a lot. I bought Air Server, which turned my Xbox into an Apple TV and a Google Chromecast, and I love the Xbox One as a package, like everything it gives.
Yeah.
And it also happens to have the greatest controller ever made, but that's that's my number 5. I know it's recent, and many people probably think it's weird that a new console can be one of your favorites, but for me it is.
I don't disagree with that. It's a good console, Yeah. It's. I mean, we could probably have a whole podcast on the 2013 launch and everything else, but it's been talked about to death. Things happened, things didn't happen.
I also
we're all here now at the end. I think
I also have a weird opinion on that launch.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
the majority.
We could agree that whatever's come out of it, the end now, where we are now, I think it was a necessary journey to take, because the platform as it is now and what it stands for and what I now can get out of it across my PC, across my console, I'm way happier now. So it's a good console.
You know what though? I'm not gonna lie. I did like the idea of being able to buy a disc, pop it in, install it, and then take the disc away. Yeah. I still lament the fact that we lost that, but anyway, that's for another podcast.
Number 4.
Number 4. I can see out of it.
He's like, thank God they aren't talking about that subject.
No, it's just, there's, like, I've been involved in a lot of things at Microsoft over the years, and there was a lot of cool stuff we were working on regarding some of the other things that didn't happen. Yeah, and it's too bad that not all of it did happen. But you know what? Again, it's, be customer obsessed. Customers probably weren't ready for it.
But look at what's happened to the market.
A lot of it is today.
Look at the digital physical
I hear you.
now in 2019 compared to back then.
Here you go. No, but like you were paying the cheaper disc prices and getting a digital copy.
I know.
I mean, everyone complains about the cost of digital games, but then we were being given the option to get the best of both worlds, and
there's a lot of, there's a lot of neat ideas,
Some land, some don't.
Exactly. I reckon we should have a whole episode about that, honestly.
We could.
But yeah.
Number 4.
All right. Number 4, the Mega Drive. I'm not going to call it the Genesis, because it was the Mega Drive in more countries.
Yeah.
Look, I've said on another episode that I grew up as a Sega fanboy, so naturally, when it came to a home console, I was always going to go Sega, because that was the place I could get my arcade games. I grew up in the arcades, and I loved everything Sega did in the arcades. So the Mega Drive was... I mean, I know there was the Master System before it, but the Master System... I don't know. It was an interesting one. I did love my Master System, but the Mega Drive was that.
It was the step. It was that next step.
It was the distillation of everything that made the arcades great for Sega, and you were getting as close to that arcade experience at home as possible. And then I think it's funny. The Mega Drive had all the arcade stuff, but then what made the Mega Drive truly great was the first-party console-only stuff that they made. So Sonic the Hedgehog, Streets of Rage, which, to this day, I still play Streets of Rage 2 now.
Streets of Rage 2.
Yeah, I still play Streets of Rage 2 even now, and 4 looks...
I have the soundtrack in my car.
It's... Oh, man, that stage 1 music just...
It's so good. Go Straight.
God.
It's
just
one of the best.
Do you guys want me and Kyle to leave? Because we can just go. It's
ever.
Fine.
Yeah, it's the Sega fanboy out here.
Oh no!
Oh my God!
I mean, have a look. I mean,
I can't. Like you saw it, you saw it. Just on the side, you saw the composer list for Streets of Rage 4, right?
Ridiculous.
It's the original composer. Yeah. It's the guy from Jet Set Radio. It's I forget the other. You're just like, can I just buy the soundtrack now, please? Like, can I just...
I don't.
Just give it to me.
As iconic as Halo's choir is, and I just, when I hear that stage 1 music for Streets of Rage 2, it is just, it's on another level. It's amazing.
Yep.
So the Mega Drive holds a special place for me, because it's, even though I did play I played the Atari and the NES and all that sort of stuff. The Mega Drive, I think, was that console where it gave me those games that I think made me realize that this is it. This is my favorite hobby. This is what I want to do all the time. I just got so involved when it came to the Mega Drive. It was awesome.
The Sega fanboy was born.
And I mean, the 16-bit console war were just unbelievable. Like, I know, and I think maybe because the internet wasn't a thing back then and social media wasn't a thing back then, obviously the toxicity wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
But there was still a very real console war back then. Like, I remember a couple of my best mates were on the Nintendo side of the ledger. And I remember one day, one of my friends came over and we were flipping through a Hyper magazine. And there was this 2-page ad for Street Fighter on Super Nintendo, because remember, Street Fighter was exclusive for a little while on Super Nintendo, which, God, that pissed me off. As someone that adored Street Fighter 2 more than anything, that really pissed me off. And I remember the ad, and someone on the Discord actually found the ad and posted it, but it was literally just a pair of eyes. It was centered on the eyes, and at the bottom you had a screenshot of Street Fighter with a logo, and all it said was, Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo, Mega Drive owners, dream on. And that's all it said. So that was the ad. And
well, you wouldn't see that nowadays.
Well, I mean, there were so many brilliant ads back in the day between Nintendo and Sega. They really kind of played it rough. Like, I think it was great. Like, I don't know if you remember the one with the kid that's sitting on the park bench, right? And he's like playing a Game Boy at the time. They're doing the portable thing because they had the Genesis had the Game Gear, right? And they had this kid that's like playing on the on the Nintendo, and of course the Game Boy is black and white, and the kid like looks down and there's a dead squirrel, and he picks the dead squirrel up by the tail, and it's like kind of frozen, like it's like totally dead, and he hits himself on the head, and then he's like, oh, color, and then he sees everything in color because there's like and he's like, this is how you get color on the Game Boy, and you're just like, man, like nobody would do that today. It's so awesome, though, at the time. You're just like, oh, yeah, they're totally gunning for each other, right?
I think the closest thing you can see nowadays is the whole, to my mind, is the whole Apple Mac versus Windows stuff. Because Apple did it all like, hi, I'm a Windows PC, and it was all like that.
That's more of a relic of the late aughts, though.
Yeah, I saw one the other day where they found a guy in Melbourne whose name is... Mac.
There's still
Macintosh
Microsoft's still doing that,
or whatever it was. That's a classic ad.
It's faster on my Surface. I was just like,
that ad is absolutely hilarious. Every time I watch it, it's so funny.
That is funny.
But yeah, back to
Master System.
Yeah. Well, number 3, I guess. Yeah, the Mega Drive. We covered that extensively. Now, number 3, this is the one that makes most people groan, is the Nintendo 64. I know for most people, it's the NES or the SNES is their favorite Nintendo console, but for me, there is a bit of a story to the 64 for me, though. Like, growing up as a Sega fanboy, I wasn't interested in anything Nintendo, and my only exposure to Nintendo was through my best mate. So he had the NES, and I played that, and that was okay, and he had the SNES, and we had some fun with that. Like, I used to love playing Super Soccer with him on the SNES, which I was just playing on my Switch earlier today. But then one night, he got the Nintendo 64. He had a bit of a sleepover, so it was sort of like almost the progenitor to the LAN nights that we had with Xbox. And he had the 64. We all came over. We stayed at his house, and man, playing Mario Kart 64 and GoldenEye in split screen, and it's just
GoldenEye,
oh man!
4-player.
And the TV was only 68 centimeters. It was that's like that is smaller than the computer I'm looking at right now, and so the screen size was this big. Like we were playing GoldenEye or Mario Kart on the real estate that big, but man, it was just
so much fun.
It was so fun, and we just loved it to death. And it was that night that I'm like, you know what? I love Sega, but I've got to start buying the other consoles now. There's too much I'm missing out on. I can't deny myself stuff like this. And so I went out and bought the 64, and man, Ocarina of Time, and
just so many good games.
To this day, there are no better wrestling games than the Aki wrestling games on Nintendo 64. WrestleMania, WCW versus NWO, No Mercy, just unbelievable. And
yeah, you're right. There were a ton of good wrestling games.
They were
on
unbelievable.
That system.
And just the 64, as far as Nintendo goes, almost every major franchise bar Metroid, either one of their best versions was on the 64, it was born on the 64, or it took off on the 64. So, Super Mario Kart came out, obviously, on the SNES, But really, Mario Kart 64, whether you like it or not, Mario Kart 64 was the iteration where Mario Kart really took off as a franchise. Even if you don't think it was the best one, which I do, but most don't. Yeah. Smash Brothers was born on the 64. Mario Tennis was born on the 64.
They were all called something 64 as well, which was
and just
unique
even
moniker.
That was the first time when numbering was involved with a console, and aside from the Ataris, but and you didn't call it the Nintendo 64. You just called it the 64, and everyone knew what you were talking about. Yeah. I love that console to death, even though most people don't.
I have a lot of fond memories of the N64 because I had a weird path into gaming. My dad used to work for IBM before we moved back to the UK, and he bought me an Amiga. That was my first games thing. And I went round a friend. The Amiga 600 Plus, I think I had. And there's a load of great, amazing games on that I could go into another time. But we saw the N64, and I pestered, and I got one. But for me, the game that just was, I dumped so many hours in, and I was awesome at it, was Perfect Dark. And there was one point I used to play as Mr. Blonde. I don't know if anyone remembers that character from Perfect Dark. It was like the evil agent that was actually an alien in a human skin from Perfect Dark. I don't know if you recall that guy. He was like a really tall blonde dude, but I always used to play as him as a character. And there was this weird moment where like my friends and I, we all had a pad each, and we'd like permanent inked like our like design on it, and we'd all sit there playing split screen. And I came in one day, and they were like, "Hey man, do you want to play?" And they were all playing as my character. And I was like, no! And I
you can't do that.
My claim to fame, and if they were here, they would totally vouch for me. 25 kills. We did a team game, so it was me versus M3. They didn't kill me once. I just murdered them. All of them. I was like, I am champion! And that's my fond memory of N64. But I thought it was a great console. And
I loved it. I loved it. I just know that everyone in the Discord absolutely hangs shit on me whenever I mention this. They all hate it in there.
I think for social games, there was nothing that could touch it. Right? Like, I think that's where like you mentioned Mario Tennis, which I've got a ton of stories for Mario Tennis and Mario Party and Mario Golf. Like, all of these games, oh god, the golf game is so good. Like, there are so many games that were social, and I think that's, honestly, that's the first Nintendo console that really clicked socially, because they did 4 controller ports.
It changed the course of everything.
And I think that's where... Yeah, it kind of did, right? Where Nintendo's like, okay, we have our franchises that are more solo, but then we have all these games that are now going to open up, and you see that with the Switch now too, where they embrace party games. And but yeah, no, that there's for that pivotal thing. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from the N64. It's not, I would say, like, if I was like, it's my favorite but there's some games on that I think were just mind-blowingly good.
Well, look,
right?
I understand someone that grew up with Nintendo. I can understand why the 64 wouldn't be their favorite out of everything Nintendo ever did, but just from the perspective of, I was all Sega, and it was the Nintendo 64,
and you got that and you're like, oh my god,
it was your gateway drug.
So that's why the 64 holds that special place with me. I just adore it, and I still have mine. I've got that Pikachu, the Pokemon version, the half blue, half yellow.
Yeah, I remember.
Came with the VHS tape of the first movie. Still have it, and it's funny. I find if you jump on eBay, it's actually probably the 64 and its games that are probably still worth a lot more money.
Yeah.
Once I downloaded Banjo-Kazooie 1 and 2 and Perfect Dark on 360, there was obviously no need for me to play the 10 frames per second versions on 64 anymore. So
performance was rough.
I threw them on eBay, and they're in perfect condition. And to this day, I still got $100 Australian for each one.
Wow.
Many, many years later. The 64 stuff has held its value extraordinarily well.
Nostalgia's there, man. It's there.
Yep.
I still hope we get the mini. I still hope they do a mini. They did for the...
Well, I've got the NES and the SNES sitting here on my desk. My kids love playing on them. So, it would be cool to have the 64 here, too.
So, console number 2, the Xbox 360. It's
a good console.
Man, what a time.
Unbelievable.
What a time to be alive.
I still remember the launch. Yeah. I still remember, playing Perfect Dark Zero for the first time. I had a CRT still. I hadn't switched over to an LCD yet. I had a CRT, but it was a widescreen Trinitron that supported component. So, it was still kind of in HD, but even then, the leap was
mad,
unbelievable. But look, R-Rod aside, which my launch console actually did die within 8 hours. And at the time,
wow.
I didn't know. Well, at the time, I didn't know what a fussy.
Mine lasted about a month.
Yeah, well, at the time, to be fair, I actually weirdly blame myself. Now, at the time, I didn't know what a fussy piece of hardware it was, but my setup at the time, it was very, very cramped, and I still suspect that it died because of poor ventilation, because after that launch console, I never had another problem with a 360 since, and I owned about 10 of them. So I bought all the limited editions because they were all very, very cool. And just, I never had a problem after that because I think I realized how fussy it was and I gave it all the breathing space it needed. And
I just sacrificed a cat on the altar of Microsoft every couple of months, and it kept me sweet for the entire gen.
Yeah, I was fine.
I had an arcade and I never
do what you got to do
problems.
to game, right?
I had an arcade and I never experienced those problems. Honestly, like the 360 was probably, I don't know. My first actual game console was a PS2 because my parents got that for me for my Christmas, and it was a gift to both me and my brother. And we never played any of the big games that I'd come to find out later were like the things you should play on a PS2. Like, what is it? Ico or Shadow of the Colossus or God of War. All those original PS2 games. We never played it. The only thing I played on the PS2 was Medal of Honor and Ratchet and Clank, and that was about it. That was the only thing it was there for. And the second console we got was a Wii, because I thought it looked cool
so
from the
young.
advertising.
Jesus Christ!
I feel so old.
The first system. I even told you guys this. The first system I ever had wasn't even a console. It was a PC.
Yeah,
an old Intel Pentium system, I think.
Yeah,
and.
Pentium was a great machine.
Yeah.
Pentium 2. Ran Wing Commander so fast you couldn't play it.
But
that was a
so and then the 360 came out, because 360 what convinced me to get a 360 was we're playing Modern Warfare 2 at a friend's house, playing 4-player split screen against it's just me and my brother, him, and another kid we knew, and we just had hours and hours of fun because we'd spent time outside pretending to be army men, growing up. So just being able to sit down and play at a console was basically just an extension of that, But honestly, the 360, oh man, Portal 2 in 2011. I bought that game on launch and I played it, replayed it and replayed it around 8 times. In the span of a week.
We lost him?
You may have.
I reckon
he played it for some time. He'll come back.
Did I cut it?
Yeah,
did I cut out for a second?
You did. You're back.
You're keeping us in suspense.
As I was saying, Portal 2. I did say Portal 2, right? Before I cut out.
Yep.
Okay, Portal 2. I played that around 8 times in its initial launch week.
Christ.
Orange Box.
Wow.
Orange Box. I bought without even knowing what the heck was on it. I just said it had 5 games on it, and I was like, cool, I'll buy it for $20. And it turned out Portal was one of my favorite games of the generation, one of the top games of the generation for me. I never got into Halo until Halo 4, because even though I owned a 360, I never really cared about Halo 3 because I didn't like the way it played. So
I can understand that.
I still don't like.
Halo fan.
I still don't like. To be fair, I still don't like the way it plays. I prefer Halo 5 infinitely more.
I've said that before. Halo 4 and 5, 343 nailed how Halo feels. absolutely nailed it.
Exactly.
Again,
but everything
my feelings
about
on Halo
the
could be another
360
podcast.
But I think the biggest game of the generation for me wasn't even exclusive. It was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. And the reason why was it was the first big AAA release with a season pass, right? Yeah. That if you bought into the Call of Duty Elite Pass, right? You got 2 new maps every month after the game launched, right? Along with all these other bunch of goodies like free prestige tokens, like out the butt, right? Out the wazoo or something. And and it was just consistently engaging. I was there from launch all the way till the launch of Black Ops 2.
Wow.
And it was the first time I actually realized, holy crap, season passes can work, because the way they handle all the systems to support just being able to deliver that much content to users on a consistent basis. It wasn't just you buy the season pass, you get the map pack whenever it drops for everyone. No, it was every season pass holder gets the perks of paying that extra $50. 2 maps every month, a bunch of extra goodies, no having to worry about loot boxes or anything else. You bought the season pass, you were a VIP in Call of Duty's eyes, in Activision's eyes, you know?
Yeah.
And I miss those days. Yep. It was if you pay extra for the game, they're not asking for even more out of you later down the road. Yeah. I paid for the season pass, I should get all the goddamn content.
Yeah. I mean, there are games that have done that right and have done that wrong. I definitely prefer the general trend nowadays, and I think Activision was the last holdout, but obviously with Modern Warfare... Wait, are we in 2007? With Modern Warfare releasing this year, they've said, everything's going to be free, and that is, in my opinion, you can offer cosmetic perks and things like that, because if the whales want to spend on that, fine, fund your development. But when season passes existed, the difference between the haves and the have-nots was not conducive to your player base, and obviously I think developers and game creators knew that, but there may be people that were like, no, we need to pay for you guys, so we have to do it this way. And over time, I think that conversation has, thankfully for the benefit of all of us, changed. But I agree. I think when season passes worked as they should have, you felt that general, I'm valued, I've paid for this, and I'm getting my value out of it. But I definitely prefer the environment we have now, where I buy a game, and this is coming out to the game. Enjoy, have fun. We're glad to see you back in it a month later.
It was that constant stream of content that made Modern Warfare 3 the only Call of Duty that I ever reached, I think, 6 prestige, which was around level 600, 700. Yes. Around there.
That's some dedication.
The only game I spent that much time. I still enjoy the game a lot, and I still go back to it often.
That was the last Call of Duty I was excited for. Was Modern Warfare 3.
It was the last Call of it was the last Call of Duty where Activision said, okay, we know you need to we know we want you to monetize this in other ways, but we're gonna let you handle the monetization model and entirely. And it really felt that way because Infinity Ward poured so much effort into making the season pass feel like a natural extension of the game. You are paying for that privilege, so we're going to give you the privilege. You're not paying just so you can have the damn maps. Because if I wanted to pay for just the maps, I could have just bought the map pack, right? So
I agree.
I viewed it as I viewed it as an MMO expansion pack, where it's you get the base game of the MMO. Right, but if you want the experience, you're gonna be buying the expansions. Yeah. So
Yeah, 360, man. It was good times.
Yeah, but the thing is,
360.
To bring it back to what we were saying, or what I was saying earlier about the console and not just the games. As great as the game library was on 360, and it's arguably one of the only libraries to rival the PS2, just overall as the depth and breadth of the library. Again, what I loved about the 360 was everything else it did. So before the 360, we didn't have digital marketplaces on a console. And now that's just the thing. Obviously, that's just the norm. Before the 360, we didn't have a real operating system on a console that let us manage everything, storage and settings and the built-in, the fully integrated store. When everyone else was doing like a separate app for their store, the 360 fully integrated it. The fact that the OS kept evolving as Microsoft had new ideas for what they wanted the console to be, so the operating system kept changing, and it was all that sort of stuff that I loved.
Yeah.
Because to me, the games are a given. On any console, like just about any console ever made has had games worth owning. So for me, from my perspective, games are just a given. I always loved other stuff that consoles did. So that's why part of the reason I love the 360 so much as well.
Yeah.
It did so much that the industry is still, like, it made an impact that is still being felt to this day.
Yeah, I've argued this. I did an opinion piece, I think, on XboxEra.com that the impact that Microsoft as an entity in that game space made that generation was huge. Like everything that we now take as a norm, they kind of pioneered that path. And I know the Dreamcast did online first, and then the OG Xbox took it to that next level. But Xbox Live and online multiplayer gaming became what it is because I know PC had it, but I'm talking from a console perspective.
Yeah.
Because of the elements, the party chats, the evolution that the 360 saw from launch through to now. I mean, you look at the launch games, and then you look at something like Halo 4 that released at the tail end of the gen, and then when you played that Halo 4, it was like, how did they get it out of that hardware? Like, what an artistic and engineering achievement that was. It was a really great console, and I have so many fond memories of it.
That, now that you mention Halo 4, but then that speaks to the other part of the 360 that's had an impact on the industry to this day that Sony has now copied with the PS4. Like, part of the 360's, I don't know what Microsoft
architecture,
are calling it, obviously behind the scenes, but part of the, I guess, more what might have been the mission statement for the 360, what might have been the ethos with the 360 was about making a console that the developers loved making games for. So I know that they approached a lot of developers about how do you want us to build this thing? To the point where Epic said, give us more RAM.
Yeah,
we
want Gears of War to look like it looks.
You want Gears of War, then you give us more RAM. And like that's part of why all the multi-platform games were better on the 360. That's why they were able to get really amazing results very early out of the 360, where most consoles
you didn't see that.
Don't get me wrong, Halo 4 was obviously a little bit of an exception to the rule, where we were getting that late generation unbelievable looking game, but like we still had amazing looking games on 360 very, very early on.
Yeah,
like games that held up.
And even then, in terms of like services too, it's just like the 360 came out in 2005, right?
Yeah.
At that point, Steam was just a glorified launcher for Half-Life.
Yeah, it's
right?
crazy what
the whole idea of an integrated marketplace for games that was all digital started with the 360.
Yeah.
And it went everywhere. Like
Apple,
Steam is a juggernaut on PC because it borrowed ideas that Microsoft started on the Xbox.
Yeah.
Now, its execution of some of those ideas is questionable at best, but we can at least say that a lot of the reason why Steam is so big now and is such the dominant marketplace on PC is because Xbox pioneered many of the ideas that gave way to Valve saying, you know what, let's try and do this over here.
Yeah.
But even indie gaming got its spotlight on the 360 with Xbox Live Arcade and just digital distribution in general. Like, I understand looking back now, people look at that 50 megabyte limit on Xbox Live Arcade games and think, Jesus Christ, really? But at the time, you sort of understood it at the time. And to me, that as archaic as it seems now, that 50 megabyte limit was, I don't know if impetus is the right word, but it was kind of the impetus for how there was these indie developers that were trying to make these small little games, and a lot of publishers went into their back catalog and said, hey, let's, Doom is like a 10 meg file. Let's re-release Doom here. It's tiny. It fits in. And let's make more money reselling Doom. And then other publishers started doing similar stuff. I just thought,
Geometry Wars, man, was one of the best launch titles of all time.
Geometry Wars.
Geometry
what
Wars
an addiction!
Awesome. It just, but that's what I mean. Like even that,
it was the high score. It was the high score table, right? It was the. I mean, don't forget the one thing to remember about Xbox Live and, everything that was around the smaller games. XBLA was all XNA, right? Yeah. The fact that Microsoft not only did they have great development tools for the Xbox 360, it's one of the things that, like, at the time I had, PlayStation dev kits and Xbox dev kits, and you'd get an error on the PlayStation and it would turn blue and go, and you get some crazy code on the screen and you're like, what the heck what does this even mean? And the Xbox is like, oh, it crashed. Hey, here's a video link. Here's the dump from the game. Like, I've been recording all this. Like, you can send it to people. Like, it was so integrated into actually how you made games that you were literally just like, oh my God, these tools are incredible, just on the development side. And then, XNA just allowed so many more people that may not have been game creators to make games. Yeah. Right?
What was that? Dishwasher.
Dishwasher.
I was just about to say.
Dishwasher Dead Samurai. Those the husband and wife team that made that, and then Salt and Sanctuary and all the games they make now. Like, they had no game making experience, but they could make art and they figured out how to program. Like, XNA allowed them to do that and allowed so many people to become game developers. That it's one of the things that I actually think is so important, and I'm glad that we embrace it, especially with the Xbox One. Is like, we really need to have great tools. Like, great tools are so important. And when the Xbox One started off, the tools weren't really as good as they are now. They're not near. I mean, like, you look at the Xbox One tools now compared to what they were, and you're just like, oh my God, these have come so far, right? But I think that there was definitely I don't know if you want to call them missteps or whatever, but the tools went from the 360 being incredible to when the launch of the Xbox One being like, wow, this is not up to par with what you had on the 360. And I think that is one of the reasons it hurt, right? Like, in the transition between the generations. But the 360 was incredible in so many ways. I mean, I remember fighting for I wasn't there when they raised the limit on the game on XBLA games, but I was one of the people that was fighting to get XBLA games to be 1,000 points instead of 200. When I'm like, no, this is unfair. Like, we're making all these games that are as long as AAA game, right? Disked games, and they have this much content. Like, I have games that are longer and have more, like, depth to them. Why am I being limited to 200 points? And we, argued it to getting to 1,000, which was great, but. Yeah, no, it's an amazing, like, just to chime in, like, it's an incredible console, and things like the arcade and high scores, and because it was all networked and you could battle against each other, and you had leaderboards, and you had everything that was an arcade, but now it was all online, and it was so easy, and it was all built in, right? And trials, like, don't forget, like, every XBLA game had trials, right? And then you could play the game for a little bit and then buy it if you wanted to, and it was just like this. That there's so many innovations that were done at that time with that console that I think made it just shine in so many ways. I still have 1, 2, 3. There are at least 3 360s in my house right now because I do all my TV through Windows Media Center. I'm like a total
always see you on Windows Media Center online. Always.
I know. Like, I've got 1 billion hours on Windows Media Center. Like, no one will ever beat me in terms of time played on Xbox because I've got these things running all the time because all our TV is through them. Yeah, and everyone's like, why are you using Media Center? Oh, it's our television.
That's right.
But yeah, no, like, you could do a ton with it, right? And that was an incredible console.
But that's what I mean.
There are all
that's
these
what
other...
it goes back to. Like, it goes back to other stuff aside from the games. Like, they did. By the end of the generation, Microsoft had turned it into an incredible media player. It was doing everything. I've still got the HD DVD player in my cupboard.
I bought one.
Wow.
I've got about 7 movies left. I sold most of them off, but I kept a handful of them. They're here somewhere. But yeah, just the 360 was just it was
your jam.
It was unreal.
Beautiful
amazing.
console.
So I have to ask,
and again, at the time, had the greatest controller ever made.
Yep.
Even with the atrocious D-pad holding it back. The D-pad. But I do remember reading a story that there was sort of a reason for that, and wasn't it because Nintendo held the patent for the cross design or something? I think
I don't know.
Nintendo
maybe.
had held on to the patent. That's why Sony's was separated the way it was, because Nintendo held the patent for the cross for like 20 years, and then it expired by the time the Xbox One came out. So then Microsoft was like, "Yep, get a cross on the D-pad for the Xbox One," which they did. I love the D-pad on the Xbox One personally, but yeah. So
what's console number one?
Console number one
with bated breath.
Yeah. Look, the console number one. Everyone guessed it in the Discord, and it should be fairly obvious. That's the Dreamcast for me. And I mean, look, Xbox for me. Xbox became the unofficial spiritual successor to the Dreamcast. Like the Dreamcast,
the OG Xbox, right?
Yeah. But like the Dreamcast, again, that embodied everything that I loved about consoles and everything that had an impact on me as a gamer. So like I said, I grew up a Sega fanboy, loved the arcades, and the Dreamcast was that first console where you were getting the arcade perfect experience or better at home. So, you know, I remember I think when the Dreamcast came out, I was 19. And I remember getting into an EB preview event, EB Games, and they had a whole bunch of Dreamcast set up, and they had Sonic Adventure running, House of the Dead 2, Soul Calibur, and I just remember, I'll never forget watching Sonic Adventure, and you see that Orca run for the first time, where Sonic is just, it's on rails, but you see Sonic running along the beach, and that Orca's just like busting out of the water and breaking through the bridge, and just, it was just unbelievable seeing that for the first time. And then I went to the next station, and they gave me the light gun, and I'm playing House of the Dead 2.
Oh, man, I miss light gun games so much.
Well, I mean, they evolved into first-person shooters, didn't they?
There's something different about a light gun game, you know? Like, you know, FPSs are fine, but light gun... I was actually chatting to a friend of mine. One of the projects I want to kind of get done or get started this year is get a Raspberry Pi or an old PC and build an arcade cabinet with loads of light gun games installed, because someone out there was looking at all the current versions of light guns that exist, you know, using, I can't remember what it's called, iTrack or something like that, and someone showed a prototype they made that actually solves the problem, because a lot of the weird mod versions are really
takes
rubbish.
A bit of hardware to do, though. It does take a bit of mucking around to do. But
but he's come up with this amazing new design that actually just works like you would expect a light gun game to work, even on an LED or
LCD.
an OLED TV.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, now I really want to build one, because I just have so many fond memories of House of the Dead. And Time Crisis.
But it's not just House of the Dead. Like on the Dreamcast, you've got Virtua Cop didn't make it. They were on the Saturn.
No, that was on the Saturn. Yeah, because I had two light guns, and I would play Virtua Cop 1/4 each gun and get through the entire game dual gunning the game by myself. I love that.
Cop,
so John
Virtua
Woo.
Cop was unreal.
Boom, 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 boom.
But even like the lesser known, like Confidential Mission was actually a really good light gun shooter, and it was just, I was spewing that the Dreamcast wasn't around long enough to get ports of like Jurassic Park, The Lost World, which, man, I don't know if you've ever played it at the arcade, but that is one of the best light gun games ever, and I was so annoyed the Dreamcast wasn't around long enough to get a port of it. But yeah, you know, Daytona USA, which had an incredible port on the Dreamcast, Virtua Fighter 3, Fighting Vipers 2, just, again, I've still got my Dreamcast, and I even got a copy of Half-Life for it, or should I say acquired a copy of Half-Life, because it never got released. It literally got canned at the last second. The game was made, it was ready to be shipped, it was ready to go, and just, I can't even remember the reason why, but it never made it, never saw the light of day. You know, Shenmue, which, you know, is whatever, but everyone seems to love Shenmue. But
it was okay. Yeah.
I was never like I got caught up in the hype back then, because, you know, they showed off clips of what Shenmue looked like, and everyone was like, "My God, look at these graphics!" And It was the.
Well, it's like it was Virtua Fighter
that's
open
right.
world.
It was.
Right?
It was Virtua Fighter RPG, which I think was its working name when it was being developed.
Wow.
It was initially started life as Virtua Fighter RPG. But then, I bought it and I started playing it and I was just like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I just remember spending a lot of time talking to...
Forklift.
Yeah, I remember spending a lot of time...
I just remember running a forklift forever and, like, just doing jobs.
Why am I doing this?
And,
this is
like,
a job now.
Yeah, it was fun at the time, but it still was like, why am I doing
that's
this?
right. And,
like, of all the things I could do in a video game.
And that's the thing. Like, I just remember walking up to all the NPCs and talking to them, and nearly every conversation went the same way. He'd ask, they'd say something, and then he'd just go, I see. I see. And I was like, okay, nah, I don't think I enjoy this anymore. So I went back to my arcade games, and I adored it. The online gaming was huge back then. Like, we weren't gaming online on a console, and I loved the VMU. I mean, the VMU was just the coolest thing ever. Like, it was like this little Game Boy that held your save files, and you could...
I mean, Skies of Arcadia, right? And it had the little VMU game that you could play with the little shmoo guy that you could get extra treasure with.
Oh, and then there was the Ciao...
And the battery lasted like 3 hours in the VMU, and it would totally...
That beep, that high-pitched beep, that's what the Dreamcast is known for now, that high-pitched beep from the VMU that's sitting in your controller. The Ciao Garden, like, your VMU was a Tamagotchi when it came to Sonic Adventure, and I don't know, did you ever play Virtua Tennis on the Dreamcast?
I might have. I don't know. It's been a long time.
Virtua Tennis,
I don't remember.
If you had the VMU plugged in, the match you were playing was actually playing out on the VMU. So there was these two little stick figures that were running side to side and up and down, and the match actually played out in the VMU as well. It was just, it was unbelievable and
crazy stuff.
Yeah, the Dreamcast was just and the library, while it wasn't big, it was very much quality over quantity.
Yeah,
like there was just
Soul Calibur
and
first Soul Calibur game released on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, and like that was, as far as I'm concerned, that is Capcom's golden era. The Dreamcast, like Power Stone, and what was that other game? It's Cannon Spike. Cannon Spike on the Dreamcast was just unbelievable. Resident Evil Code Veronica. I absolutely adore the Dreamcast. That's my favorite console ever to this day. I love it.
That's a good list. It was a good list, mate. I don't disagree.
A lot of recent stuff, which for someone my age is probably a bit weird, but I love it.
I don't know. I think as games have evolved and the art forms have evolved, it's fun to go back sometimes, and some games do carry their gameplay and wear it on their sleeve, and you're like, I don't care how this looks, it plays great. But I think, the average gamer will probably value their visuals nowadays and their ease of use and all these other bits and pieces. So I don't think it's wrong to have more modern consoles on that list. As someone who didn't come in from the SNES or the Mega Drive route, friends had them, but they didn't connect with me. Console-wise, it's really the N64 that kickstarted it for me. And then, you walked into Electronic Boutique in the UK and they had the Halo demo pod, and you jumped in the Warthog, and it was like, what is this dual stick nonsense? Like, what? How does this? My brain. And then I think me and my little brother stood there for like an hour, and the guy was like, "You're gonna have to get off this machine. We have other customers." And we ended up going back and trading it all in. But everyone has that moment for a particular device that you just have this memory. And I think it's the memory and that nostalgia that makes it,
and that's
evoke that emotional response.
I'm one of those people that I at the moment, I think gaming right now is probably better than it's ever been, despite people's many complaints. Like, I get it. I love the old stuff, and the irony is I grew up a Sega fanboy, but two of the old games I still go back to this day and play Super Punch-Out on the SNES and Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, they're just classics.
I keep replaying those two games specifically, as well as Streets of Rage 2. But it's funny. I'm not one of these people that just sticks to the nostalgia and says, "Well, no, everything was better back then." Like little things that people take for granted,
really.
Like just being able to save your game whenever. Like people don't realize that back in the day we couldn't just stop a game and save, turn it off, and come back. Like a lot of us had to leave our consoles on for a full day and then come back.
You just left your SNES on, left it like the NES and the SNES. You just left it on. You're like 40 character password that I've got to like, and your letters all look the same, and I'm like, I'm just gonna leave it on, and I got 3 lives.
Your save file was literally leaving the console paused for potentially 2 or 3 days at a time, and then going back.
That's crazy.
Yep,
just
that's a
little
good list,
things
man.
So
that's good times.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm acutely aware we've been running now for. I think this is going to go down in record. I don't think we're ever going to do a podcast longer than this. But my God, whoo, boy!
I think this one might need some editing.
So I think we'll close out. But Adam, massive thank you for giving up.
Thanks heaps, mate.
For jumping in and chatting games with us. It's been a genuine pleasure. Are you going to XO19? Do you know if you're going to go there?
I will be at XO19.
As a London-ish, I live just outside. I will also be in attendance. Fingers crossed. So I'll make sure I come and say hello.
Yes, please do.
Good laugh.
And I'm not going to let you forget.
We've got some.
Let you forget, Adam, that you still owe me a coffee date next time you come down to Melbourne.
I owe you a coffee next time I'm in Melbourne. I promise you. I will. Since Tantalus is in Melbourne, I will be there again, and we will definitely go do coffee. I have to take a longer trip. I mean, I literally, like, just to give you an idea, I was on a plane for 16 and a half hours. It landed at like 7 a.m. I got off the plane. I went to the hotel. I took a shower, and I immediately went to work. And then I was at work for 3 days, and then I got back on a plane the day that we ended. I went to sleep for like 4 hours, and then got on a plane and flew back. So it was this completely like
whirlwind. Yeah.
How many hours did you fly for how many hours of meetings? It was totally worth it, but it was a super crazy trip. But no, I got to take some more time. I want to explore more of Australia. Like I said, I've only been to Sydney, and that was years ago, and then Melbourne recently, and I just love the country. So
nice one.
Yeah. We'll go do coffee.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And for those of you tuning in, don't forget to give us the old like and subscribe on YouTube. I love saying that. I feel like such a douche. And give us a listen on Spotify.
Well, you didn't.
I mean, you didn't.
At least you didn't do the whole. Hey man, hit the like button.
It's the
What's
super
up, buddy?
Americanized. What's up, guys? I'm here with it.
Yeah. Oh, that was perfect.
The whole,
you've got that down.
By Squarespace thing. We're not brought to anything by Squarespace.
I go for a really British version. Be like, good evening, gentlemen. If you would be as kind as.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks all, and we'll see you on the other side. Catch you later.
See ya.